Boruto is now the world's greatest enemy of the ninja world. Hunted, wanted, and an enemy of all villages, including his own. As if that weren't enough, his closest friends and family see him as the one who killed the 7th Hokage and his wife. But that is the least of Boruto's problems. Now, alone, he must face the most powerful enemies ever seen. Enemies with the potential to destroy the world. The most important detail, however, is that Boruto trained and trained hard. He is now the only one with the power to stop these enemies. To follow this new journey, check out the biggest summary of Boruto Two Blue Vortex here on YouTube. This summary is packed with details, and it's incredible. This video took a lot of work, so if you can leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, that would mean a lot. Every comment helps the channel grow. Let's get into the summary. In the Hokage's office, Sarada Uchiha takes center stage. Her new look reflects confidence and rebellion. A stylish off-the-shoulder jacket, earrings with the Uchiha, other accessories that highlight her striking person. Despite her refreshed appearance, her tone of voice carries impatience. She debates with Shikamaru, now the 8th Hokage. The atmosphere is tense. Shikamaru, wearing a cloak almost identical to Naruto's, maintains his serious. He argues about the sanctions imposed on Boruto, justifying them as necessary and aligned with the will of the Leaf Village. For Shikamaru, Boruto had crossed an unforgivable line by being accused of assassinating the 7th Hokage, threatening Kawaki. Sarada, on the other hand, was outraged. The young Uchiha insisted that it was inconceivable for Boruto to be capable of such an extreme act, arguing that he should at least have a chance to explain. The debate escalates. Konohamaru, present in the room, tries to mediate the situation. Tempers remain. Shikamaru argues that Boruto's actions reflect the village's rules and will, while Sarada reinforces her belief that something is wrong. For her, Boruto is not guilty, and his escape is understandable given an unjust execution order. However, Shikamaru remains inflexible, ending the discussion, insisting that Sarada must return to her mission. Frustrated, the young woman makes her indignation clear, comparing Boruto's situation to that of her father, Sasuke. As Sarada leaves, she reminds Shikamaru that Naruto, the 7th Hokage, brought Sasuke back to the village even after his crime. With that, Sasuke was not only accepted again, but also became one of Konoha's greatest allies. Before leaving, Sarada firmly declares that Naruto is her example, not Shikamaru. The scene shifts to the Daikokuten dimension, where Naruto and Hinata remain trapped and unconscious, wearing the same. The gloomy environment contrasts with the figure of Kawaki, who appears in silence, observing the couple from afar. His new look is simpler compared to Boruto. Longer hair, introspective expression reveals the complexity of his thought. Back in the village, Sarada walks beside Sumi. Their conversation reveals the challenges they both face. Sarada reflects on her impulsive behavior during the confrontation with Shikamaru, but Sumire reassures her. Omnipotent, an incomprehensible and immensely powerful ability, alters people's perception. For everyone in the village, Kawaki is now the 7th Hokage's legitimate son, while Boruto is a traitor. Sarada questions the inconsistencies of this narrative. How could Kawaki be altered by Kara if he was born and raised in the village? And what happened to Momoshi? However, these doubts are slowly being erased by the molds everyone perceives. Sarada and Sumire wonder how they can face such an overwhelming ability. Two arrive at a room where Eida and wait. The boy, always provocative, mocks their attempt, stating that it is impossible for them to change anything. Eida, however, reveals that although she cannot control him, she is beginning to understand better how it. Sarada insists on continuing to seek and showing that she will not give up, even in the face of such an overwhelming power. Eida begins to explain the mysterious ability known as Omnipotence. She reveals that it is an Otsutsuki Shinju technique capable of granting wishes, and it was precisely Kawaki's wish that gave rise to the current situation. Sarada hears this with concern, especially when Eida mentions that everyone's memories have been altered. The memories involving Boruto and Kawaki were swapped, also changing the positions they both occupy. Everyone's perception. Upon hearing this, Sarada cannot hide her despair. Is there any way to reverse the situation and restore the original memories? Eida, however, is realistic. Even if they try to explain to people what happened, they wouldn't understand. She proposes a disturbing reflection. What if in fact the altered memories are Sarada's and Sumire's and not other people? For Eida, it is more sensible to give up trying to revert everything to its original state. The only alternative would be to overwrite the memories again, but that is extremely risky. Eida also expresses her curiosity. Despite not being Otsutsuki, Sarada and Sumire keep their memories intact. This raises suspicion. Eida questions how this is possible and approaches them with a question that makes them tense. Are they really her servant? In another area, Himawari was involved in intense combat training with Chuchu. The fight was dynamic and full of skill. Himawari started with a powerful kick, which was blocked by Chuchu, but she quickly retaliated with shurikens thrown into the air. Chuchu used her partial expansion jutsu to dodge counterattack by transforming into a spinning ball. Although Himawari was agile, Chuchu managed to immobilize her with an expansion of her hand. While Himawari was on the ground, Shikadai appeared to offer words of encouragement. He praised the young girls, highlighting her potential as Kawaki's younger. Inojin and Chuchu also congratulated her, highlighting the impact of her initial kick. Himawari, even exhausted, thanked them, still determined to improve her skill. Himawari, sitting after training, was questioned by Inojin about her motivation for wanting to become stronger. After hesitating, she reluctantly admitted that she wanted to be useful to Boruto. Her companions reacted with surprise, considering his negative reputation in the village. Himawari, however, stated that Boruto, before her own eyes, had risked his life to protect both her and Naruto. The young girl also expressed her belief that her father was still alive, contradicting the official version. Meanwhile, Kawaki was busy locating and reducing the claw marks left by Code around the village. He used the power of Daikokuten to eliminate them, preventing them from being used against Konoha. During the process, he discovered a mark on the body of a ninja who had not noticed his presence. This visibly irritated him, and he demanded that Shikamaru gather all the ninjas involved in the search to check for other. Despite the effort, Kawaki showed growing frustration with Code's threat, who seemed to always be one step ahead. It wasn't long before the situation got out of control. A ninja named felt something strange, from which a mini-tailed bee created from the claw marks emerged. The creature attacked violently, spreading chaos and putting the village on high alert. Reports quickly reached the sensory tracking division, indicating that similar attacks were occurring in other parts of. Shikamaru, acting as Hokage, ordered civilians to seek shelter and available ninjas to focus on containing the In the midst of the confusion, Kawaki intervened to save a woman attacked by a mini-tailed. He used his modified arm to repel the creature with a powerful blow, while ordering her to flee and follow the shinobi's instructions. However, the attacks did not cease, and the village continued to be gripped by panic. In the middle of the turmoil, Sarada appeared on. With a precise blow, she eliminated one of the mini-tailed. Quickly assessed the situation. Observing the creatures, he realized that they were able to move between locations using their own claw marks as transportation. However, before she could formulate a plan, two more creatures emerged from a defeated mini-tailed beast. From the back of one of them, Code appeared. Code, with his carefree posture, revealed himself before Sarada, provoking her while announcing his object: find Boruto. Sarada, surprised, confronted, determined to protect the village and uncover what Code was really planning. Tension in Konoha continued to grow as Sarada tried to convince Code that Boruto had not been in the village for years. However, Code's insistence revealed his impatience. After 2 years of fruitless searching, he had given up looking for Boruto directly and decided to use the young ninja's former companion to lure him out. Without ceremony, he demanded that Sarada call Boruto, believing that he would appear if he heard her voice. Before Sarada could react, Code was suddenly hit by a violent kick to the face. When he recovered, he saw Boruto standing in front of him, wielding his sword and staring at him with a serious and challenging expression. Boruto's appearance was so unexpected that it left Sarada speechless. Code, furious, tried to attack using his modified arms, but Boruto dodged with agility, showing the evolution of his ability. At that moment, Kawaki felt Boruto's presence and the village's sensors confirmed his arrival. Meanwhile, in the sensory tracking division, the news of Boruto's return caused an uproar. Shikamaru, surprised, ordered the ninjas to remain focused, containing Code and his claw mark creature. While carefully observing, Boruto tried to understand his intent. At the same time, Eida, using her Senrigi, observed everything from afar, who murmured Boruto's name enigmatic. On the battlefield, 3 creatures surrounded Sarada, while Boruto remained in front of her, facing Code with determination. The villain, visibly frustrated, provoked Boruto, mentioning Kawaki, showing that his search had finally reached a direct confrontation. The moment was marked by Boruto's serious expression, seemed ready to face any threat. In the next chapter, Kawaki finally confronts Boruto. He provokes him, questioning how someone who disappeared 2 years earlier could now threaten to spare his life. Boruto, however, maintains his firm posture, warning Kawaki to eliminate Code's creature while he still had a chance. The tension between the two is palpable, especially when Boruto suggests that he would not hesitate to go beyond what he had done before, alluding to the eye Kawaki lost. While Kawaki reacted with disbelief and sarcasm, Sarada watched everything, shocked by the change in Boruto's attitude. Before she could process the situation, Boruto asked her to prioritize protecting the civilians who were still in the village. Despite his apparent coldness, he showed concern for the safety of others, reinforcing his determination to solve the threat. Meanwhile, the battle against the clawmark creatures continued in other areas of the village. Shikadai and Chocho fought side by side, using their abilities to contain the creature. Himawari, observing from the sky alongside, was impressed by the courage and strength of her companion. However, the creatures proved to be more treacherous than they emerging unexpectedly from their defeated ally. Chocho was caught by surprise by an attack, but Inojin, mounted on his bird, saved her at the last moment, reprimanding her with irritation, showing concern. The battle in Konoha reached a new peak of intense. Boruto back, tensions increased, and all eyes were on the imminent confrontation between him, Kawaki. Boruto's determination and the impact of his presence indicated that the battles to come would be decisive, not only for the future of the village, for the fate of everyone involved. As the battle for survival unfolded in the Konoha sky, Himawari and Inojin found themselves in trouble. One of the creatures, with a swift and brutal move, used its tail to destroy the bird that supported the two. Himawari began to fall, completely vulnerable. Creature, taking advantage of the moment, lunged towards her, determined to attack. Inojin screamed for her, but knew he wouldn't have time to save her alone. From below, Shikadai watched the scene helpless, till a powerful presence emerged at high speed. Kawaki. With impressive precision, he flew to the two, allowing Inojin to grab Himawari in the air. Meanwhile, Kawaki kicked one of the creatures with enough force to throw it far away. But to his surprise, the monster recomposed almost instant. No other choice, Kawaki joined the group formed by Inojin, Himawari, and the rest of Himawari, relieved, thanked her brother for saving her, but Kawaki, irritated, reprimanded her for continuing to call him bro. Before the conversation could continue, Shikadai warned about the difference of the creature fate. It was visibly stronger than the other claw-marked creature. Suddenly, the monster emitted a strain, almost as a harbinger of destruction. Another creature appeared beside it. This one attacked Kawaki with brutal force, smashing his face against the ground, cracking the surface. Shikadai screamed for Kawaki, but before he could help, the creature grabbed the young bird a single Otsutsuki. Tension in the air was palpable. Shikadai quickly used his shadow paralysis jutsu, immobilizing the creature temporarily. He encouraged Kawaki to flee, but the boy, now activating the power of karma, responded with fury. The term Otsutsuki seemed to irritate him deeply, and he unleashed an explosion of energy that destroyed the creature. However, the victory was brief. From each defeated monster, new ones emerged, ready to continue the attack. The unique patterns on their face, like claw mark, were an unsettling reminder that the fight was far from. As chaos took over the village, Boruto, surrounded by his own claw-marked creatures, remained calm. Wielding his sword, he calmly analyzed the enemy's move. When one of the creatures advanced, Boruto reacted with impressive speed, delivering a precise blow that cut it from neck to rib. In a fluid movement, he sheathed his sword as the creature's pieces fell to the ground. Other creatures were quick to attack, but Boruto advanced with surgical precision, eliminating them one by one. His movements were so fast and lethal. When it was all over, the ground was covered with fragments of the monster. Code, observing from afar, was visibly irritated, but Boruto, serene, warned him about continuing the fight. Code, however, seemed to despise the creatures he had created, referring to them as mere disposal. Boruto in turn warned about the true terrors, mentioning their connection to the Ten Tail, which left Code. Meanwhile, Sarada also faced tense battle. Using the Great Fireball, managed to defeat some creatures for engaging in close combat with her. Her movements were agile and precise, demonstrating how much she had evolved. Nearby ninjas were impressed by her skill, but she, indifferent to the praise, emphasized that the title of Genin or Jon mattered little on the battlefield. However, the danger proved even greater when one of the creatures, recovering, tried to attack her from behind. A ninja noticed the threat and, in a heroic act, placed himself between Sarada and the blow. Fortunately, he was captured and began to transform into a tree. For Sarada's horrified, the process was fast and cruel, with part of the ninja's body being absorbed by the twist around them. Other creatures replicated the same attack, transforming more ninjas, spreading despair. Sarada tried to understand the gravity of the situation. Boruto and Code continued their confrontation. Boruto seemed more informed about the true nature of the claw mark, the Ten Tail, suggesting that the alterations made by Code had transformed the monster's terror. Seemingly endless threat pressured the heroes to give their all to protect Konoha. The battlefield was ablaze. The fate of the village depended on the next decision of Boruto, Kawaki, and their ally. The fight against the horrors of the Ten Tails and Code's obstinacy pushing everyone involved to the limit of their strength and courage. Confrontation between Boruto and Code reached new levels of intensity, with every word charged with tension. Boruto, in a firm tone, tried to convince Code to stop his plan and avoid a devastating future. He mentioned the danger of the Ten Tails, explaining that by devouring the beast planted a that would give rise to the divine tree, destroying the plan. Despite the warning, Code remained confused and disbelieved, unable to fully understand Boruto's intent. Still, Boruto made his objective clear. He wanted to be taken to the Ten Tails' main body, but in return, he would spare Code's life. Koji, who was following the conversation, reacted with contempt, scoffing at the idea. To him, Boruto seemed completely insane. However, Boruto remained unwavering, showing confidence and tranquility as he declared that it would be easy to defeat him if necessary. Koji, overcome with irritation, prepared to attack. As he concentrated chakra in his hand, Boruto began to move slowly, enveloped in a growing flow of chakra. He formed a unique-looking Rasengan and named it Rasengan Uzuhiko. The energy of the attack was so intense that circles of chakra spun around him, foreshadowing something truly innovative. The tension increased. Code, who was following the scene, decided to intervene. Using his claw marks, he appeared behind Boruto and launched a sneak attack. With sharp reflex, Boruto quickly ducked, dodging while preparing a counterattack. He tried to hit Code with his chakra-infused hand, but Code managed to block the blow and launched a counterattack with his other hand. The fight became a precise and fierce exchange of blows, Boruto using his sword to block Code's attack. Despite Code's confidence, Boruto remained calm. He commented on how easily he could defeat his opponent, which irritated Code even more. Suddenly, the chakra around Boruto began to expand, enveloping Code like an invisible prison. Code tried to understand what was happening, but his confidence soon gave way to concern. He felt the chakra trapping his movements and questioned, surprised, what Boruto had done. Boruto, without hesitation, gave his last warning. He demanded that Code guide him to the Ten Tails, or else he would not hesitate to finish him off right there. Code, still despising the threat, challenged Boruto to try to defeat him. In a quick movement, he launched a fierce attack, but Boruto dodged with ease, always keeping out of reach. Code, increasingly frustrated, realized that Boruto was on a different level. His movements were precise, almost superhuman, and his ability to avoid attacks bordered on the impossible. Boruto, taking advantage of an opening, approached Code at high speed and delivered a direct blow to his stomach with the Rasengan Uzuhiko. The force of the impact was overwhelming, and the chakra around the attack seemed amplified by an unusual and Code was thrown violently, screaming in pain as his body was sent flying. Even trying to recover, he could not stand properly, staggering due to the massive damage received. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Eida followed everything with her son, observing the events from afar. Intrigued, she commented on Boruto's technique, finding it surprisingly simple at first glance, but Demon beside her perceived something much deeper. He revealed that Boruto's Rasengan Uzuhiko used the planet's own rotation as the basis for its power, becoming an attack of unimaginable proportion. Eida, shocked by the explanation, could not believe what she heard. Boruto's technique transcended the ordinary, using planetary energy as a weapon. Demon in turn admired Boruto while the battlefield remained in suspense. With Code defeated and the true strength of the Rasengan Uzuhiko finally revealed, the balance of the battle seemed to have shifted, but the impact of this new ability was yet to be fully understood. In the intense battle between Boruto and Code, the atmosphere was tense and charged with expectation. Code, visibly weakened and almost out of strength, barely stands. Despite his pathetic state, his mind still tried to process what Boruto had done. Everything around him seemed to spin chaotic as he struggled to understand what was happening. Boruto, demonstrating coolness and mastery of the situation, explained the devastating blow he had. The Uzuhiko, innovative technique that involved the planet's chakra, inflicting relentless damage. Boruto's merciless description of Uzuhiko's effect made it clear that Code's suffering endless until his life, just as the planet's rotation. Code, confused and disoriented, tried to get up, soon fell back to the ground, defeated both physically and mentally. Silence was broken by the arrival of Kawaki, who, without hesitation, attacked Boruto using his modified. Same moment, the Inoshikacho trio Himawari appeared on the bringing new tension. Himawari, concerned, called out to her brother, while Shikadai questioned Boruto about his presence in the Leaf Village and his interaction with Code. In the midst of the confusion, Code, still fallen, tried to summon his claw mark, create an escape route. However, Kawaki quickly dispelled the mark, demonstrating his determination to finish off the enemy. Shikamaru, through communication, instructed Kawaki not to miss the chance to eliminate Code, but Boruto intervened, warning of the danger of provoking. The tension between the two adoptive brothers was palpable, with Kawaki clearly showing his hostility towards Boruto. Suddenly, a mini-Jubi emerged from one of Code's marks and attacked Kawaki. However, with quick reflexes, Kawaki used his modified arm to impale the creature. The victory was brief. Code took advantage of the moment to teleport through the remaining mark. Escaping this, frustration took over the group, especially Shikamaru, who ordered the immediate elimination of all claw marks in the village to prevent new attacks. Meanwhile, Himawari tried to approach Boruto, but Kawaki reprimanded her, insisting that she stay out of that dangerous situation. The atmosphere became even more tense when Kawaki confronted Boruto direct, sarcastically mentioning the time that had passed since they last saw each. Boruto in turn responded calm, relieved to see Himawari safe, but making it clear that he was not willing to give in to Kawaki's hostility. Before the confrontation between them could intensify, nearby, a small toad appeared on Boruto's collar, bringing crucial information. The infiltration into Code's base had been successful. Although the 10 tails had not yet been located, the news indicated that the fight was far from over. With the fate of the planet at stake and tensions between allies building, the battle was just beginning to reveal its deeper development. In the dimension where Code kept the 10 tails, the scene was desolate. Code, wounded and staggering, observed the titanic creature, now reduced to an inert and surprisingly smaller state. The mini-Jubi was immobilized. Its imposing presence seemed to have disappeared along with much of its strength. Hidden among Code's rags, small toad watched intent, muttering to itself a confirmation that was indeed the 10 tail. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Boruto was informed about the situation. Without hesitation, he began to perform hand signs, demonstrating unwavering determination. He prepared to act, but not before murmuring a phrase that ended the chapter with an air of mystery. Very well, the tension in the Hokage's office. Before Boruto disappeared, it seemed that he had exchanged information with someone. Shikamaru, with his strategist's posture, pondered the possibility of there being a spy among the detection. If that were the case, he was determined to discover the truth. The investigation was already underway. Sarada entered the room with firm step, her expression overflowing with determination. She directly challenged Shikamaru's suspicion, stating that Boruto's act clear. He faced Koji and forced him to reach something evident from the interaction. Although confident, the young woman could not avoid a verbal confrontation, insisted on reminding her that Boruto represented an inevitable threat. Sarada, indignant, retorted with fervor, highlighting that she herself possessed power, was determined to use it to destroy them. The conversation reached an impasse. Kamaru, more serious, redirected the focus to the events involving Code and the mysterious transformation. Sought answers about the nature of the phenomenon, but Sarada only confirmed that the victims were still alive, suggesting that perhaps there was a way to save Boruto. According to her, seemed to know more than he let on. As Shikamaru reflected on Boruto's purpose, the scene shifted to Code, faced the mysterious Shinju in the dimension where the 10 tails was confined. Each of them had a peculiar appearance. One resembled Boogie, another Moegi, while a third had impressively similar features to Sasuke. Code, stunned, murmured the idea of a Shinju with ego, while Boruto prepared to face the creature that resembled Sasuke, wielding his sword with determination. The confrontation was brutal. The Shinju, with fast and precise movements, attacked Boruto with frighteningly familiar techniques, including a jutsu that resembled the Chidori. Boruto managed to defend himself, using his hand enveloped in lightning-style chakra. But the battle intense. Another Shinju, with an arm that transformed into a tried to trap Earth-style. Despite his resistance, Boruto began to be overwhelmed. Observing from a distance, Koji seemed oblivious to the imminent danger. He saw the Shinju as a convenient solution to his own problem, while Code took advantage of the confusion to escape, disappearing with his claw mark. Boruto, furious, tried to stop him, but was warned by his toad ally about the need to retreat. Even under pressure, Boruto continued fighting the Shinju. One of them, appearing to be the leader, calmly observed, declaring that Boruto could not escape his fate. With a quick hand seal, Boruto disappeared using the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, reappearing in an isolated location, leaning against it. He looked at his scratched headband. Someone approached, warning him not to exert himself to the point of endangering the entire planet. Boruto, exhausted, responded with a tone of regret, admitting that he had acted in haste. The scene made it clear that the battle was just beginning, with the Shinju awakening and the fate of the world hanging over Boruto. In the devastating scenario of Boruto Two Blue Vortex, events follow a line of increasing tension as new dangers emerge. After an intense clash, Boruto finds himself in the shadow of a giant tree, marked by Sasuke's sacrifice. The tree trunk displays the legendary ninja's trait, revealing that he had been transformed into part of Code's sinister claw mark plan. Fight against the enemy left marks not only on the battle, also on the hearts of the survivor. Kashin Koji, now a reluctant ally of Boruto, tries to prepare him for the inevitable confrontation. His firm posture and direct words reflect the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, Boruto, still inexperienced, carries the weight of his master's expectation. The scene is filled with melancholy as Boruto approaches the tree where Sasuke is sealed, observing the sword the master wielded until the last. With determination, he picks up the weapon, promising to carry Sasuke's legacy while keeping his words in silence. In the future, Boruto appears with a transformed appearance. His eyes, once full of uncertainty, now emanate a maturity forged by battle. Konoha, the atmosphere is one of despair and indignation. Konohamaru, alongside the Inoshikacho trio, observes the devastating effects of the 10 tails. One of the trees displays Moi, transformed as part of the cruel plant, while her figure is replicated. Shinju, the expressions of hatred and determination grew, reflect the promise of revenge and rest. The Shinju, revealed as representations of the sealed victim, possess their own. One of them, resembling Mogi, provokes the group, while another, identified as the leader, reflects an instinctive desire to devour Naruto. This declaration shows that the enemy's objective is not limited to Boruto and Kawaki, but also to the legacy of the 7th Hokage himself. The narrative culminates in an emotional dilemma: fight to save those who were sealed and prevent the Shinju from advancing their. Boruto, now with Sasuke's sword in hand, the weight of Konoha's expectation, walks towards a new battle. Fate of his friend, his village, very essence as a ninja are at stake. Eida, with the aid of her Senrigan, carefully observed a disturbing. The figure of Matsuri, a mysterious being emanating a predatory instinct, drew her attention. Matsuri seemed to fix her target on Konohamaru Sarutobi as if guided by an uncontrollable will. The Shinju leader, alongside Matsuri, encouraged this choice as if feeling a growing connection with that. Among the Shinju, one of them, who resembled Sasuke, questioned its own existence, while another replied that such doubts were irrelevant, highlighting that instinct would guide them. Meanwhile, Eida continued to capture the unfolding event, reflecting on the terrible transformations people had suffered. The victims of Code's claw mark had become trees, and their chakras gave rise to the fearsome Shinju. At that moment, a buggy clone, who until then seemed harmless, approached Eida unexpectedly. He stared at her intensely, revealing that he had managed to observe everything through the sen. Surprised and uncomfortable, Eida dropped what she was holding, while Demon, concerned, tried to understand what had happened. The narrative then shifts to Konoha, where Sarada, Sumire, and Amado were in a technological equipment. Sumire seemed suspicious, observing Amado carefully. Conversation quickly became tense when Sumire brought up Boruto's return after 3 years of absence. Despite having protected the village from a Koji ambush, Boruto was still fugitive. Amado, in a cold, confirmed that Boruto had pursued the enemy leader, some considered inevitable. Sumire, however, did not hold back and questioned Amado's intention, especially about his desire to bring his daughter, Akebi, back to life. Karma. Amado explained that the only way to revive someone was through karma restoration, and that he had implanted his daughter's data into Boruto's regenerated karma. He also revealed that Kawaki possessed a special karma, the result of his experiment. The conversation revealed disturbing about Amado's motivation surrounding Boruto's and Kawaki's body. Sumire processed all this. I monitored the situation from a distance, reporting the details. Tension increased. Sarada and Sumire discussed the implications of Amado's altered memory, seemed to contradict the evidence self had presented. The final scene was melancholic, full of photo of the Uzumaki family rested in a frame, shattered glass, representing the devastating impact of recent events and the uncertain future that awaited the character. The tension intensifies as questions of identity, memory, and trust dominate the dialogues between the characters. Sarada reflects on the influence of omnipotence and how the manipulation of memories makes everyone in Konoha accept Kawaki as Naruto's legitimate son, ignoring even concrete evidence. Despite this, Sarada recalls the actions of her father, Sasuke, which were guided by trust in the true Boruto. Boruto appears unexpectedly, interrupting Sarada's and Sumire's reflection. He walks towards the two, declaring that Sasuke trusted him, even doubting his own memory. In a moment of emotion, Sarada runs to hug him, demonstrating her happiness at her friend's return. Sumire watches the scene in silence, while Boruto, touched, returns the hug and acknowledges that he has finally returned home. The chapter ends with a powerful message. The embrace is proof of memories that never change. Boruto is back in his master's name. In chapter 6, titled 3 Years, the focus shifts to Shikamaru, now leading Konoha as interim Hokage. He faces pressure from the village elders who demand a definitive solution for considered a traitor. Furthermore, they criticized Kawaki's attempted assassination, shook Konoha's reputation, threatened its relationship with the dying. Despite the criticism, Shikamaru remains calm, promises to resolve the situation, postponing formalizing his title. In his office, he receives a visit from who delivers old records at his request. However, Shikamaru discreetly reveals through telepathy that the information sought is part of a secret investigation. He emphasizes that not even the detective Kawaki or Eida should know of his intent, trusting only Ino to help him. Meanwhile, in another part of Konoha, Kawaki questions Eida about the state of the Ten Tails. She confirms that the creature has developed its own consciousness and transformed into something completely new. Eida also explains that Code lost control over the monster, which has now become a threat on a demon. Upon hearing the conversation, reveals that the Ten Tails is after Naruto Uzumaki's life, as well as targeting Eida. The chapter progresses with an atmosphere of mystery and imminent danger, setting the stage for even greater challenges to come. Kawaki was lost in thought, trying to understand why the mysterious monsters targeted the 7th Hokage. Doubt lingered. What was their objective? Demon, always direct and provocative, reminded him of something essential. Only a small group knew the truth about Naruto, him, Eida, Boruto, and Sasuke. But with Boruto and Sasuke's criminal, any statement from them would be ignored. However, if the monsters attacked Konoha in search of Naruto, the carefully constructed lie by Kawaki exposed. Tension grew. Demon made no effort to aid, launching a veiled threat about his indifference. Kawaki's life. Eida, on the other hand, tried to soften, but the relationship between the three far from. Kawaki stood up, ignoring Demon's word, and announced his departure. He put on his jacket and determined left the place. On his way out, he crossed paths with Mitsuki, who calmly reaffirmed his mission to monitor Kawaki. The exchange was brief, but charged with tension, Kawaki showing his irritation at Mitsuki's persistence. Meanwhile, Boruto was reunited with Sarada, and the reunion was filled with emotion. Sarada, visibly nervous, was still processing the spontaneous hug she had given. Her thoughts were chaotic, full of doubts and unspoken feelings. Sumire, calmer, took the initiative to start the conversation, expressing her happiness to see Boruto after so long. The atmosphere between the three was a mixture of relief, Boruto showing a warm bond. The relax soon gave way to serious. Boruto revealed that his chakra was hidden, but his presence in Konoha would not go unnoticed for long. He had a purpose in returning. Talk about Sasuke. The news that Sasuke had been absorbed by the Ten Tails shocked Sarada and Sumire. Sarada tried to understand what that meant, while Boruto explained that Sasuke's sacrifice had been necessary to protect him. The pain in Boruto's voice was evident. The weight of his master's loss was severe. In another corner of the village, Kawaki stopped abruptly, feeling something. He sensed Boruto's presence. Mitsuki, always attentive, noticed the change in Kawaki and confirmed his suspicion. A snake emerged from his arm, showing that Mitsuki was ready to act. Back to the trio, Boruto continued to explain. He revealed that the Ten Tails, creature destined to devour chakra and transform an Otsutsuki's into a divine tree, had changed somehow. Now it was evolving into a Shinju, something that shouldn't happen. Sumire and Sarada were incredulous at the revelation, trying to assimilate what all. Meanwhile, Mitsuki mentally contacted Shikamaru to inform him of Boruto's presence in the village. Shikamaru, surprised, questioned how Boruto had managed to hide his chakra. Mitsuki explained that Boruto was south of the village and warned of the possibility of an imminent confrontation between Kawaki and Boruto. The urgency of the situation was palpable, and Mitsuki was determined not to let Boruto escape again. The tension increased. Kawaki, unconscious on the ground after being bitten by Mitsuki's snake, showed how serious Mitsuki was. He acted quick, forming Shikamaru and ensuring the situation was controlled. Back to the conversation, Boruto mentioned Koji, a mysterious figure, and associated his actions with the Ten Tails transformation. Sarada, confused, tried to understand better, but the complexity of the situation only increased. The scenario was increasingly tense. Boruto's return to the village brought more questions than answers. The atmosphere was charged with tension. Boruto faced a decisive. He explained to Sarada and Sumire the strange evolution of the Ten Tails, which was now transforming into a Shin. Despite not being an Otsutsu, Boruto suggested that Ishiki's karma in Koji could be the cause of this change. Suddenly, Boruto was surprised by a mental communication. It was Shikamaru using Ino's transmission. He warned him to remain calm and not show any expression. The conversation revealed that the communication was outside the village's sensor record. Clandestine effort by Shikamaru to make contact. Sarada and Sumire called confused. Boruto seemed oblivious, immersed in the mental dialogue. Questioned Shikamaru about trust, but the current interim Hokage warned him about the imminent danger. It was at this moment that Boruto noticed something approach. A gigantic snake emerged, ready to attack him. Quickly, he used the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, teleporting while wielding his sword. Upon turning, Boruto came face to face with Mitsuki, now in his perfect sage, enveloped by a powerful chakra aura. Mitsuki, in a serious tone, stated that he was waiting for Boruto. Sarada tried to intervene, but Mitsuki, overcome by his emotion, asked her not to interfere. Without hesitation, Mitsuki summoned 3 chakra snakes to attack Boruto. Calmly, Boruto activated the light purple electricity jutsu and, with his sword, cut through the attack. Mitsuki, determined, used the hidden shadow snake, making snakes emerge from the ground. Boruto, attentive, jumped before being hit, observing the ground around him being destroyed. In the air, he faced Mitsuki with determination. Boruto told Sarada that he would save his master and everyone who had been transformed into tree. He then quickly sped away. Sarada tried to call him, but Boruto was already out of reach. Mitsuki, observing his former companion's escape, seemed conflicted but continued his pursuit. While flying through the forest, Boruto re-established mental contact with Shikamaru. He criticized Mitsuki's interference and accused Shikamaru of prioritizing his position as Hokage. Shikamaru's response was pragmatic. Konoha and the Land of Fire had decided to eliminate Boruto, and he needed to act cautiously, even if it meant letting Mitsuki act. Shikamaru then shared an unsettling theory. Everyone's memories might have been manipulated, reversing the roles of Boruto and Kawaki. Boruto, shocked by the possibility, landed in a dense forest. He ensured he was far enough to escape Kawaki's detection. However, before he could move on, he was surprised by one of Mitsuki's. Looking back, he saw his former companion approaching at high speed, still in sage. The atmosphere became even heavier. Boruto prepared for the inevitable confrontation, declaring that it would not be an easy battle. Mitsuki advanced with determination, while Boruto, firm, prepared to face the friend who had now become an adversary. The chapter ended with the clear message: the battle between Boruto and Mitsuki, two former allies, was about to begin, and there would be no way to avoid the confrontation. Chapter 6 of Boruto Two Blue Vortex concludes with an intense and emotionally charged confrontation between former allies. The narrative delves into Mitsuki, who, enveloped in conflicting feelings, begins the next arc with a beautifully drawn close. The aqua green tone and details reminiscent of snake skin texture capture Mitsuki's essence and his connection to serpentine nature. The chapter's title, The Sun's Whereabouts, reflects Mitsuki's dependence on his moon and the sun that guides him, elements that symbolize his deep emotional connection with Kawaki and Boruto. In an introspective reflection, Mitsuki recognizes that his existence and brilliance depend on another, the sun that illuminates the darkness in which he lives. Kawaki, for Mitsuki, is the reason for his struggle and his survival. The narrative quickly shifts to the battle where Mitsuki, in his sage, attacks Boruto with ferocity. Boruto, demonstrating surprising control, responds calmly, throwing shurikens that Mitsuki neutralizes with snakes summoned from his chakra. The exchange of blows intensifies, Mitsuki summoning new snakes that destroy the ground in rapid explosion, forcing Boruto to retreat. In a strategic maneuver, Boruto uses the Flying Thunder God Jutsu through a previously thrown shuriken, appearing behind Mitsuki. He tries to talk, but Mitsuki maintains his determination, stating that he himself will now be Boruto's adversary. Meanwhile, Shikamaru, observing from a distance, explains the situation. Mitsuki used his snake venom to incapacitate Kawaki, trying to avoid a direct confrontation with Boruto and prevent him from manifesting his Otsutsuki side. The fight, however, seems inevitable. Mitsuki demonstrates his understanding of Boruto's strength, acknowledging that he surpassed Kawaki, even defeated Kodo. Despite this, Mitsuki believes he needs to intervene, even if it costs him his life. His dedication and sacrifice are evident as he summons multiple sages, each accompanied by giants made of chakra, which advance against Boruto at high speed. Boruto, though pressured, maintains his composure. He dodges attacks while the surrounding forest is devastated by the destruction caused by the aerial scene. Highlights the impact of the battle, trees being knocked down and the terrain completely altered. Boruto, with his sword infused with lightning-style chakra, eliminates Mitsuki's clones one by one, moving with impressive agility. As the dust of battle begins to settle, Mitsuki, still determined, advances against Boruto with renewed intensity. The gaze of both reveals that there is no room for hesitation. The fight between the two former companions just beginning. The emotional weight of this confrontation promises to leave deep marks on both. The chapter ends with the promise of an unforgettable battle and the reminder that alliances and bonds can be tested in the most difficult. The conflict between Boruto and Mitsuki marks the beginning of a new phase where the confrontation between past and present determine the fall. In the heat of combat, Boruto and Mitsuki reach the climax of their fight with powerful lightning style. Mitsuki summons the lightning snake Jutsu, while Boruto counterattacks with the light. The energies collide in the air, creating an explosion of sparks and a rapidly dissipating dust cloud. Amidst the chaos, Boruto advances and, in a precise move, presses his sword against Mitsuki's neck, but stops the attack before completing the blow. Recognizing defeat, Mitsuki deactivates Sage. He seems torn between admiration and frustration, while Boruto remains calm, uttering words that seem more like deep reflection provocation. The air feels heavy with the weight of the confrontation, not only physical, but emotional. Boruto observes Mitsuki with an expression that mixes compassion and firmness, mentioning the role Kawaki plays in Mitsuki's heart, like a sun that gives meaning to his existence. Mitsuki's silence is broken by a mixture of incredulity and hesitation. He tries to understand Boruto's word, but seems reluctant to accept what he hears. In an act of desperation, Mitsuki summons a snake that wraps around Boruto, trying to reassert his strength. However, Boruto remains unyielding, continuing to provoke Mitsuki, suggesting that his obsession with Kawaki has blinded him to the light he himself possesses. Mitsuki reflects on these words. Shikamaru, observing from afar, does not hide his astonishment at Boruto's ability to understand his opponent's feelings. Mitsuki finally dispels his summoning and faces Boruto with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. Boruto's revelation that Naruto and Hinata are alive leaves Mitsuki, Shikamaru, and Ino stunned. The idea that their memories were altered by Kawaki's omnipotent ability begins to unfold, bringing more questions than answers. Elsewhere, Eida and Demon find Kawaki unconscious but slowly waking up. The tension increases as Kawaki tries to understand what happened and the role Mitsuki played in his momentary defeat. At the same time, Boruto explains to Shikamaru about the altered memory and suggests that they have had this conversation before, implying that the cycle of events repeats in a mysterious way. The narrative ends in a moment spent, with Shikamaru trying to assimilate Boruto's words and Kawaki regaining consciousness under Eida's watchful eye. The pieces of the puzzle begin to align, but the true meaning of Omnipotence and its effects still hangs as an unsettling mystery. The atmosphere was tense, with the fight between Boruto and Mitsuki's stagnant moment of reflection. Boruto, after a quick confrontation, placed his sword against Mitsuki's neck, but stopped before delivering a fatal blow. The air was heavy, as if the combat itself had transformed into a silent dialogue between the souls of the two friends. Mitsuki, recognizing defeat, withdrew his sage mode and observed Boruto with an expression difficult to decipher. Boruto, with an unsettling calm, began to speak about a concept that seemed to be beyond any comprehension: omnipotence. He explained that the distortion of fact caused by Kawaki was an inevitable consequence of this force that altered people's memories, causing the truth to be forgotten over time. Shikamaru's and Ino's minds were attentive, but the concept seemed Boruto seemed to have accepted his part in this distorted plot, and although he recognized that there was no going back, he still believed that the conflict with Kawaki would persist, regardless of the rewritten memory. Shikamaru, always pragmatic, suggested that if he were in Boruto's position, he would make a more drastic decision: kill Kawaki. But Boruto, with a distant expression, replied that although Kawaki wanted his death, he could not simply succumb to violence. He revealed a sense of powerlessness by admitting that no matter what he did, history would always Boruto's words were laden with a silent despair, as if the very weight of his decisions was something he could not avoid. Silence hung for a moment until Shikamaru, with a certain concern, said that if omnipotence was indeed affecting everything, Boruto was. Even so, he knew he couldn't simply reveal this to everyone. The world would continue to persist. Boruto would have to move forward, carrying the burden of this global. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Jura reflected on the world and the books he read. His thoughts were immersed in philosophical doubt, questioning the meaning and the emptiness of answers. He wondered if, upon finding Naruto Uzumaki, he would finally reach the truth he so desired. Jura was beginning to act, searching for answers that were hidden, as if destiny itself was guiding. Chapter continued with an abrupt transition to a new scene where Boruto, with renewed confidence, stated that he was Mitsuki's son. His words, charged with a symbolic light, deeply touched the heart of his former teammate, who began to understand the depth of those words. Eida, observing the scene, reflected on the intensity of them, seeing something insane and beautiful at the same. Kawaki, who had joined Delta, seemed indifferent to what was happening. He didn't care what Eida thought, but was determined to follow her orders. Meanwhile, Demon remained silent, observing everything with a slight expression of indifference. Eida, for her part, was more attentive, noticing that Boruto and his allies were moving away, heading towards the forest where the final confrontation might occur. Delta and Kawaki flew quickly towards the location indicated by Eida. During the flight, Delta made a joke about Eida's relationship with Kawaki, suggesting that the situation could become even more complicated. But Kawaki, with characteristic cold, stated that once everything was resolved, he would handle the situation. The scene then shifted to the forest, where Boruto and Shikamaru continued to discuss the imminent threat Kawaki posed. Boruto explained that Kawaki, now self-aware, beginning to transform into something much more dangerous, a Shinju, an entity capable of consuming planetary life. Shikamaru, alarmed, asked if the planet was already doomed, but Boruto reassured him, saying it wasn't the end yet, but if both of them were consumed by this power, the planet would succumb to the transformation process, generating the chakra fruit and dooming Earth. Boruto's words were clear, but the tension in the air was palpable. The future seemed uncertain, and the weight of destiny began to fall upon everyone involved. The atmosphere was tense, and Ino watched, astonished, as Shikamaru reflected on the recent phenomenon involving Moegi Kazamatsuri. The information was concerning. She, from Team 10, had been devoured by Tsumiaka and transformed into a tree, just like both men and women. The repetition of the incident raised questions about what was actually happening. Boruto, serious, quickly explained that this being fed on the victim's chakra to stay alive, although he still didn't know for sure the purpose of this act. Shikamaru, always attentive, wanted to know more, but before he could get more answers, he was interrupted by a sensory team's communication, bringing a message from Kawaki. Kawaki's urgent tone was clear. Boruto had been located south of the village, and the team was preparing to approach. The situation was becoming increasingly imminent. Shikamaru, with his usual pragmatism, suggested that they should not act rash. They were dealing with someone with significant ability, and it would be better to wait for proper support. Kawaki, however, impatient, did not share the same caution, and a confrontation with Boruto seemed inevitable. Soon the scene shifted to the forest, where Boruto, hearing the conversation, used the flying thunder god Jutsu, disappearing before Kawaki could even sense his presence. Kawaki and Delta's frustration palpable, but the search continued unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Eida and Demon watched, Eida reflecting on the situation. When Mitsuki arrived at the house where they were, the exchange of words between him and Eida revealed a more personal and introspective side of the young ninja. Mitsuki, always enigmatic, shared his own reflection on what he felt, especially after meeting Eida. The conversation, initially tense, softened as he recognized the complexity of human feelings, something he had not fully understood until then. Meanwhile, Demon remained silent, observing the dynamic between the other two. Eida, with her penetrating gaze, questioned Mitsuki about it, soon understood that he was just trying to understand himself. Mitsuki's dilemma was clear. He, an artificial being, discovering himself as experiencing passion for the first, something that had been indifferent to him before. Eida, in turn, reflected on what Boruto had said, and a desire to reconnect with him formed in her mind. The conversation, which seemed trivial at first glance, ended up revealing deep layers of motivation, both in Mitsuki and Ai. The scene concluded with Eida, thought wishing for a new encounter with Boruto, as if something was still something she could understand. At that, the scene unfolds in the forest, where a claw-marked creature runs, leaving a trail of destruction wherever it goes. Jura and Hidari, two mysterious individuals, are in full communication, preparing for an Jura, with a cold calm, positions himself strategically, using a cube to observe the environment around. He seems confident, giving instructions for Hidari to continue in the correct direction. Soon, both move quickly, appearing at the entrance. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the village, Aino questions Shikamaru about the veracity of Boruto. Shikamaru, always serious, responds cautiously, asking that the information be kept confidential, regardless of opinion. Aino's unease is palpable, but she respects Shikamaru's guidance, who is soon interrupted by an urgent communication. Outside, two invaders approach the village, one of them identified as Uchiha Sasuke. The situation begins to intensify as Jura and Hidari advance towards Konoha's gate. Sarada, seeing the invaders approach, murmurs her father's name with concern. Hidari and Jura begin to question the location of Uzumaki Naruto, while a group of ninjas prepares to intercept them, questioning their intention. Kamaru, in response to the threat, follows protocol, ordering the evacuation of the population, while a new communication arrives, now from Eida, who reveals crucial information about the invaders. She identifies them as beings derived from the ten-tailed Jupe, now with self-awareness, hostile. The revelation further increases the tension in the air. The ninjas who tried to stop the invaders are brutally defeated, their lives cut short with the deadly precision of their weapon. Jura, with a look of interest, observes the scene, notices an old bookstore to his left, which he does not hesitate to explore. Hidari, following in his footsteps, continues his search for Uzumaki Naruto, while Jura seems to glimpse something greater on the horizon. The peace that seemed to dominate the city shatters with the arrival of Kawaki, who, determined to confront the invaders, launches a merciless attack on Hidari. Eida quickly arrives to support Kawaki, but both are surprised by Jura's ability, who stops Kawaki with overwhelming force. He deflects his blows with ease, breaking the modification on his arm with a single punch. Kawaki, surprised and at a disadvantage, is knocked down with a brutal impact. While Kawaki is unconscious, Eida rushes to him, desperate to help, but Jura is more attentive to the presence of another target, Uzumaki Naruto. He senses the tailed beast chakra, which still resides within Naruto, and this puts him on alert. The tension grows when Sumire and Sarada arrive, but the young Uchiha recognize the true threat. She remembers Boruto's words about the Ten Tails and the master who was taken by, but even so, she finds herself lost amidst unquest. However, the situation offers no rest. The Inoshikacho trio, along with Himawari, appears ready to face whatever. Ikadai, with his usual determination, declares that he will not hesitate, even if the target is sus. Traitor, now allied with the invader. Inojin, trying to reassure Himawari, assures her that he will be by her side. Suspense reaches its peak when Jura suddenly appears before the trio, his gaze fixed on Himawari. He observes the young girl with an almost disturbing curiosity, which leaves Himawari disconcerted and frightened. Hidari, next to Jura, questions the identity of Uzumaki Naruto, but Jura, with an intrigued tone, seems more interested in Himawari. The chapter ends with a sense of imminent danger, leaving the question hanging. Can Shinju be counter-attacked? Tension hung in the air as Jura intently watched the Inoshikacho trio, with a gaze particularly fixed on Himawari. Presence seemed enigmatic and at the same time unsettling. He analyzed the situation without rushing to act. Himawari, in turn, was visibly confused, not understanding what was happening. Nojin, always protective, positioned himself in front of her, ready to defend her at any cost. Shikadai calmly and seriously communicated with the sensory unit, warning about the presence of the invaders. He mentioned that, although there were no signs of Sasuke, the situation required immediate reinforcement. Jura, then breaking the silence, questioned the invaders' motivation for being in such a remote place. Taking a book from his chest, he made an intriguing observation about Shikadai, recognizing him as the current Hokage's son. Shikadai, disconcerted, responded firmly, asking if Jura had a message for his father. Jura, however, kept his focus on another matter. He revealed that his true interest was in Naruto Uzumaki's trail, and that, despite not finding him there, something else had caught his attention: the Nine-Tails reaction emanating from Himawari. Jura's words shocked everyone, with Inojin questioning what that meant, while Chuchu expressed her distrust of the strange invader. Himawari, paralyzed by confusion and fear, was suddenly captured by trees that emerged from the ground. Team 10's reaction was Shikadai used his shadow imitation to prevent the trees' advance, free Himawari, while Inojin quickly summoned a chameleon to pull her. Chuchu, with her partial expand, managed to catch her before she fell. Jura observed with the group's skill and coordination, highlighting Team 10's effect, uniting without saying a word. However, Jura was not there. He made it clear that his only objective was to capture Uzumaki, and that if Team 10 resisted, they would face the tension increase. Shikadai, concerned about everyone's safety, contacted by, quickly explained the situation, revealing that the invaders were after Himawari, probably due to the Nine-Tail. Meanwhile, the scene shifted to Kawaki, who was unconscious, Eida trying to revive him. Amato's presence, observing from afar, indicated that something else was happening. He murmured, clearly concerned about Jura's figure. The story was unfolding towards an imminent confrontation. In a new scene, in a rocky location reminiscent of Orochimaru's hideout, Boruto firmly held the karma mark. Kashin Koji beside him informed him that the invaders had initiated their act. Boruto, determined, activated the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, ready to move quickly towards the lead. Back in the village, Shikadai, with a serious expression, questioned Jura about his true objective. Jura confirmed that they were, in fact, following Naruto's trail, but that now his attention was focused on the Nine-Tails chakra emanating from Himawari. The mystery surrounding the connection between Himawari and the Nine-Tails deepened, leaving everyone even more apprehensive about what was to come. The scene was tense and full of mystery. Shikadai, wide-eyed, tried to process what Jura had just said. The Nine-Tails chakra emanated from Himawari, something he would never have imagined. It was a revelation that shocked him, as he knew the Nine-Tails should be extinct. Himawari, completely lost, didn't understand what was happening, and just repeated the name of the Nine-Tailed beast, not knowing the reason for such a connection. Inojin, noticing his friend's unease, tried to calm her, believing that it was all just a mistake or misunderstanding by the invader. Jura, coldly, maintained his position and revealed that, despite also being surprised by the situation, they needed answers. He wasn't there to talk, but to find the truth, and the only way to do that would be by devouring Himawari. The trio of ninjas was stunned by the declaration, especially Shikadai couldn't believe Jura's word, but even in shock, the tension only increased as Jura took a step forward, advancing towards. Meanwhile, in Shikamaru's office, nervousness took over. He received an urgent report about the invader's location, and upon turning to the person calling, he was surprised by a toad that connected with Imanaka. The news was alarming. Boruto had entered the Leaf Village. A sense of urgency hung in the air. Shikamaru knew the situation was about to intensify. Elsewhere, Kawaki woke up, still tired, but soon felt the pressure of his own regeneration ability. Eida, with relief, gently reprimanded him, but soon he noticed something strange, a sense of presence, something that shouldn't be there. His suspicion increased. Boruto, observing the scene from atop a roof, analyzed the debris left by Jura's attack. The wood-style jutsu was unmistakable. He knew it could only be the invader's work. Toad, accompanying him, confirmed his suspicion. Boruto became even more alert. Then, a direct communication from Shikamaru interrupted his thought. Team 10's leader quickly explained the situation, mentioning that the invaders were after Himawari and that it had to do with the Nine-Tails chakra. Boruto, surprised and confused, asked more about the meaning of this revelation. The situation became even more complicated when Kawaki, now aware of Boruto's presence, confronted him. The atmosphere between the two grew more tense, Kawaki questioning Boruto about his objectives and about the mysterious attacker. Boruto, irritated, tried to warn him about the true danger, but Kawaki, with his usual contempt, accused him of being the Leaf Village's true end. The dialogue between them, charged with resentment and distrust, only increased the feeling that something bigger was at stake. The tension between the two intensified, with Boruto suggesting they go together to face the invader, while Kawaki, furious, showed complete disinterest in cooperate. The threat to the Leaf Village was becoming more and more real, and every move now seemed crucial to everyone's destiny. The battle was in full swing. Kawaki was determined to defeat Boruto. His dojutsu activated, he launched 3 stakes with precision, but Boruto, agile, easily dodges. Kawaki, surprised by Boruto's speed, summons runs 5 more stakes, but again sees his attempt. Determined to end the confrontation once and for all, Kawaki opts for close combat and modifies his arm to attack. However, Boruto anticipated, hitting Kawaki with a strong punch to the stomach, sending him flying. Pain was immediate, and Kawaki fell to the ground, irritated by the Boruto, with a disdain, commented on Kawaki's lack of training, provoking further. Eida, observing the scene, expressed her concern, but her attention soon turned to another matter. As Kawaki got up, activating his karma, Boruto felt a strange resonance in his own mark. The toad accompanying him worried about the danger that karma activation represent. Boruto, trying to control the growing power within, felt his arm begin to writhe in response to the resonance with Kawaki's karma. Desperate, the toad ordered Boruto to move away immediately to avoid losing control. Boruto, with great effort, quickly flew away, trying to distance himself from the impact of the karma, while Kawaki, confused, observed the scene, questioned what was happening. From above, Inojin flew with Himawari, observing the battle below. Jura, noticing the shadows around, seemed to understand the situation. Shikadai, with his shadow imitation jutsu, challenged Jura, shouting for him to stop being distracted, but Jura, with a cold expression, responded only with a sigh of disappointment. Without wasting time, he began to form a tailed beast bomb, Bijudama, from his eye, a devastating attack that, if unleashed, could destroy everything around. The tension in the air increased. Shikadai, recognizing the danger, exclaimed in alarm. Before Jura could launch the attack, Chuchu appeared on the scene, using her ability to extend her arm and deflect the tailed beast bomb away. The ensuing explosion was colossal, and everyone was thrown away by the impact, with smoke and debris taking over the battle. Himawari, observing from afar, worried about her friend, while further ahead, Sarada and Sumire ran towards the combat. Sumire pointed in the direction, and Sarada, with a determined look, responded, thinking of Himawari and her friend, wishing they were okay. In the field, Shikadai began to get up, while Inojin received an urgent message to rescue Shikadai. He immediately used his bird to fly and help his friend, while in the distance, Hidari questioned Jura about the Jura calmly explained that the target was Himawari, and although it seemed they were rich, he believed their resistance hid some. Curiosity about what motivated them to act like this increased, making this information even more valuable. Shikadai, with a calculating look, suggested that as long as Himawari was with them, they wouldn't need to worry about another destructive attack from Jura. Chuchu also suggested it would be better to move away from the village, an idea that was quickly accepted. However, Himawari, with a resolute look, asked to be left anywhere, decided to flee alone. Inojin, surprised, immediately objected. Shikadai also tried to convince her that fleeing alone was possible given the danger, but Himawari, with a somber expression, warning that if they continued that way, everyone would be at risk, suddenly mysteriously disappeared, reappearing in another location, sitting calm. Her eyes were as if in a murmured to herself, not knowing for sure what was happening. Behind her, something surprising, a miniature of the Nine-Tails fox appeared, smaller than Himawari, but with unmistakable characteristics. Kurama, fox with a sarcastic, spoke to Himawari, asking if she knew who he was, and it was at that Himawari recognized the presence of the Nine-Tails, with a shiver running down her spine. The connection was made. The mystery surrounding the Nine-Tails chakra began to reveal itself. The story unfolds with the Inoshikacho trio, accompanied by Himawari, being transported by Inojin's bird, flying rapidly. Meanwhile, Jura observes everything from afar and reflects on the situation, realizing that Team 10 ninjas are trying to change the battlefield, protect the village, and minimize damage. Hidari, who follows the movements, quickly realizes that other ninjas are approaching and mentions the fact. Meanwhile, Konohamaru contacts the team, confirming that the 2 invaders have been located, but Team 10 has not yet been found. Shikamaru, on the other hand, reassures everyone, explaining that Team 10 is heading southwest, trying to lure the enemies there. The objective, apparently, is to protect Himawari, who's the invaders' target. The sensory team will be responsible for providing the exact location. Kawaki, who was listening to the conversation, reacts with surprise upon discovering that the invaders are after Himawari. The scene then cuts to Boruto, who is in a house, hidden on the balcony, trying to control the karma that begins to take over his body. He struggles to remain calm and control the situation, but the toad accompanying him is visibly worried. Meanwhile, Shikamaru gives clear instructions to Kawaki, asking him to go to the location without worrying about Boruto. Seems to be a problem. Kawaki, irritated and impatient, prepares to leave immediately, Eida running after him, demanding that he not leave her behind. Boruto, in turn, focuses on his own problem, trying to maintain control over the karma in his body. Although he seems to have a minor accident, he tries to calm down and convince himself that he won't have problems if he rests for him, while the toad watches in silence, increasingly concerned about the situation. At the same time, Hidari confronts the nearby ninjas and questions Jura about his intention. Jura, with a tone of indifference, responds that his plans are to go after Himawari and quickly flies away, paying no attention to the others. One of the ninjas in turn observes that Jura is fleeing. Konohamaru takes the lead, instructing the team to head southwest as Jura is clearly going after Himawari. But before they can advance, Hidari suddenly appears in front of Konohamaru and the ninja, blocking the way. He provokes Konohamaru and the others, questioning why they are interfering with his plan. The tension increases, with one of the ninjas joining the conversation, irritated by Hidari's posture, and making it clear that he is aware of the situation. Konohamaru, however, remains focused and tries to get asking Hidari to explain what is happening, why they are after Himawari. Suddenly, the sensory team confirms that among the invaders, one of them possesses chakra data that matches Uchiha Sasuke's, leaving Konohamaru in complete shock. He tries to understand what is happening, while Hidari, patient, demands answer, putting even more pressure on the ninja. At that moment, Sumire and Sarada appear, bringing with them a sense of immediate relief to Konohamaru, who greets them with surprise. Sarada, with her typical seriousness, asks if everyone is okay. Tension in the air is palpable, and the mystery of the invaders' intention continues to unfold. The tension escalates as Hidari stares at Sarada with a fixed gaze, a look that does not go unnoticed by Konohamaru, who immediately senses the imminent danger. In an instant, Hidari disappears, leaving behind claw marks that suddenly appear between Sarada and Sumire, creating an invisible barrier of danger. In an agile movement, Hidari reappears behind Sarada, intending to deliver a devastating blow. He tries to use Chidori, but Sarada, with speed and dexterity, activates her Sharingan and ducks, dodging the attack with impressive precision. Konohamaru rushes towards the confrontation, while Sarada, without hesitation, prepares her own Chidori, counter-attacking with the same intensity. The impact of the blow directly hits Hidari's rib, who feels the force of the technique and is thrown to the ground, falling heavily. Sumire approaches cautiously, while Sarada observes Hidari's fall, her expression determined yet thoughtful. The silence that follows is interrupted only by the sound of Hidari still falling, staring at Sarada with a defiant look. Meanwhile, Sarada analyzes the situation carefully. She mentions with a tone of surprise that the technique used by Hidari was a Chidori, exactly like her father. Sumire, still stunned, asks what Hidari is, but Sarada, focused, tries to understand what exactly is happening. The scene then cuts to Himawari, who finds herself in a strange place, surrounded by the tails of an enormous fog. Feeling of uncertainty and confusion overwhelmed, but a familiar voice calls her. Kurama, Nine Tails, introduces himself, explaining that although she knew him as a constant presence beside her father, he is now there, speaking directly to her, but in a peculiar way. They are not in a physical location, but in a mental visualization, conversing only with their conscience. Kurama reveals that although he was the beast inside Naruto during his battle, he has now been reborn in an unexpected way. His death was not definitive, and over time, a fragment of his chakra eventually reconstituted itself, appearing inside Himawari. The explanation is clear. The destiny of the Hyuga and Uzumaki may have influenced this manifestation. Himawari, absorbing the information, responds with confidence, introducing herself as Uzumaki Himawari, accepting the situation with surprising calm. Back on the battlefield, Shikadai and the others try to wake Himawari, but she remains unconscious. The situation becomes even more critical when Chochu spots Jura, who approaches rapidly, flying with impressive. Shikadai quickly alerts the sensory team, asking for reinforcement, while inside Himawari's mind, Kurama encourages her to accept what is happening and move forward. Himawari awakens, now fully aware of her new reality. The concern on her face is evident, and she looks around, observing the acceleration of the situation. Jura, with his devastating power, prepares a new tailed beast bomb, Bijudama, using his Rinnegan, and hits the wing of the bird drawn by Enoji, causing it to lose stability. The impact is immediate, and the group realizes that the situation has become even more dangerous. Chaos ensues as the bird begins to plummet, but Chuchu, with her super expansion jutsu, rapidly expands, creating a protective barrier by absorbing the impact with her body. With a thud, they land on the ground, and Shikadai, relieved, thanks her for saving their lives. However, the danger has not yet passed. Jura, with his immense speed, quickly approaches the group, and his menacing presence makes everyone prepare for the next confrontation, aware that the battle is far from. The tension on the battlefield was palpable. Jura, with an imposing presence, observed the team of young ninjas in front of him. His gaze was cold, unremorseful, as he explained, in an almost philosophical manner, the fate that awaited his opponent. Despite his words, the threat was clear. There was no escape for those who opposed. Himawari, frightened, felt the weight of the situation, but before she could succumb to fear, a familiar voice echoed in her mind. Kurama, the legendary Nine Tails, made his presence known, offering words of encouragement. He spoke directly to her, challenging her to believe in herself, trust in her potential, which was beyond what she imagined. Himawari's chakra had a unique affinity with his, superior to that of any of the former Jinchuriki, even Naruto's. Self-confidence was the first step to unleashing the power that was growing within. As Kurama's words resonated in her, Himawari, filled with renewed determination, ran towards Jura, ready to face the enemy. Chuchu tried to warn her, but she was resolute. However, her attempt to strike failed when Jura, with an agile move, blocked the attack and broke her leg with a pain was immediate. Himawari fell to the ground, writhing in agony. Her friends, stunned, watched this powerless before the enemy's cruel. Nojin was quick to react, rapidly drawing a tech, sending it against Jura. The enemy, unperturbed, easily dispelled the attack using a wood style. The scene seemed increasingly desperate. Jura, with a cruel smile, began to transform Himawari into a tree, explaining that within it, the young ninja converted into new without pain or feeling. Himawari, now pressed by the tree, cried, feeling helpless as Jura approached her motionless body. Nojin, in a fit of rage, went to attack Jura, but was easily knocked down by a devastating kick. Even wounded, he tried to get up and with all his strength tried to grab Jura's foot, begging him to release Himawari. Jura, with a look of contempt, paled Inojin with a wood-style technique, piercing his body with a piece of wood. The scene was horrifying. Himawari, unable to react, watched the act with horror in her eye. Inojin's body fell lifeless to the ground, and his eyes lost their light. Chuchu's desperate scream echoed across the field as she witnessed her friend's death. Himawari, consumed by sadness, began to cry even more. Feeling helpless and unable to protect those, Jura, seemingly fascinated by Himawari's reaction, commented on what he called aesthetic, as if he was seeing something beyond a simple bat. It was then that something extraordinary happened. An explosion shook the spot where Himawari was trapped, and when the smoke cleared, a surprising sight appeared before everyone's eye. Himawari, now transformed, displayed a radically different appearance. Her hair was divided into 9 parts, like tail, and her eyes, ordinary, now glowed with Kurama's power. Her posture had changed. She was wilder, fiercer, as if a new force had been unleashed within her. Himawari, with a serious and determined expression, stared at Jura, her voice filled with a strength she had never demonstrated. Kurama's power pulsed through her, and the transformation was clear. Chuchu and Shikadai, surprised, called her name. Himawari was beyond any doubt or hesitation. She was ready to fight, and Jura, who until then seemed unbeatable, now faced an unexpected force. Jura, with a slight smile of surprise, thought to himself, intrigued by the radical change he had just witnessed. He knew the battle had turned. Himawari was different, more powerful than he could ever imagine. The scene ended with a focus on Himawari's transformed face, her eyes radiant with Kurama's power, promising that nothing would ever be the same. The fight was about to reach a new level, and Kurama's return to the story brought a new and epic chapter to Boruto. Himawari, now transformed as the wielder of Kurama's power, broke free from the tree that imprisoned, destroying with a burst of chakra. The young girl descended to the ground with a fierce expression, her hair split into 9 tail-like sections. Jura observed the transformation, intrigued by Himawari's connection to the 9 tails chakra. He seemed to understand that there was something unique about the girls, but he still didn't fully grasp it. Shikadai, still stunned, noticed that Himawari's leg, broken by Jura moments earlier, was completely healed, which impressed him. Without hesitation, Himawari went to Inojin's gravely wounded body, which had a tree impaled through his chest. Using her hair, she carefully pulled him out and, upon examining the wound, realized that something unexpected was happening. Inojin's wounds began to heal rapidly. Surprised, Shikadai watched as Himawari, still uncertain about the extent of her new power, instructed her friends to take Inojin to the hospital as quickly as possible. Himawari knew that Jura's threat needed tame, or everyone would. Firmly, she asked Shikadai and Chuchu to flee. Jura seemed focused exclusively on her. Despite being reluctant, Chuchu expressed her concern, but Shikadai, with his strategic mind, convinced her that following Himawari's plan was their only chance of survival. Before leaving, Chuchu extracted a promise from her friend that they would eat pancakes together later. Himawari smiled slightly, saying she loved pancakes. With Inojin being carried by his friends out of the combat, Himawari positioned herself to face Jura, determined, confronted the enemy with her newfound strength, while Jura, intrigued, observed the girl and reflected on the irrational decision made, mentioning how Inojin ignored his warning, suffered the consequences. Speech was interrupted by a furious shout from Himawari, ordering shut up. Without hesitation, she advanced, delivering 2 devastating blows, punch to the stomach and another that sent him flying. Jura quickly recovered, leaping into the air and advancing at high speed towards Himawari. In response, she channeled Kurama's power, forming a small tailed beast bomb, Bijudam, with her tail-shaped hair. Jura, surprised, reacted using his own. The attacks collided in an overwhelming explosion. The impact was so intense that Shikadai and Chuchu from afar momentarily stopped, worried about their friend. From the smoke of the explosion, Himawari emerged unharmed, ready to continue the battle. Jura, impressed, acknowledged her strength, highlighting the feat of manipulating a tailed beast bomb even in an initial stage of power. Without wasting time, The enemy attacked again, headbutting Himawari and sending her to the ground. Even so, she quickly got up, but before she could react, Jura appeared behind her and delivered a brutal kick, sinking her into the ground and cracking the surrounding terrain. Himawari, visibly shaken, struggled to get up. Jura, observing her with interest, commented that she had awakened in him the desire to fight more seriously, which made him want to explore his capabilities against her. The battle continued intensely, while Himawari tried to resist Jura's overwhelming force. Elsewhere, Konohamaru, Sarada, Sumire, Konoha Jonin faced Hidari, who was wounded with a clear Chidori on the right side of his abdomen. Sarada, tense and worried, questioned Hidari about his true identity, how he had Manidori, highlighting that his wound was fatal. The fight against Hidari seemed as intense as the confrontation between Himawari and Jura, both sides trying to prevail amidst the chaos. Konohamaru was clearly uneasy seeing Sarada, but before he could act, Hidari surprised everyone. His seemingly fatal wound began to close in a matter of seconds, leaving Sumire and the Konoha Jonin visibly shocked. The regeneration seemed supernatural. Hidari then shifted his attention to Sarada, commenting on her eyes and mentioning the sharing. He revealed he had heard of this ability through Jura and expressed surprise to discover that the technique she had used was the Chidori, admiring the complexity of executing it correctly without the aid of the sharing. Konohamaru, without wasting time, pressed Hidari about who he was and his connection to Sasuke Uchiha, but instead of clear answers, Hidari admitted he didn't know Sasuke. He explained that he was seeking answers about his own identity, suggesting that his visit to Konoha was related to this search. Sumire, sensing the imminent danger, warned Konohamaru to protect Sarada, believing she was Hidari's true target. Suddenly, Hidari used a space-time ninjutsu, opening a portal in the ground. Before anyone could react, he grabbed Sarada's ankle, delivering a violent shock that made her scream in pain. Konohamaru and the Jonin tried to intervene, but were quickly overwhelmed. The Jonin was hit by a fire-style jutsu, while Konohamaru, attempting to use the Rasengan, saw his attack pass through Hidari as if he were intentional. Hidari then counter-attacked with Chidori, sending Konohamaru flying after a devastating explosion. Sumire tried to help Sarada, but ended up being electrocuted by Hidari and fell unconscious. Sarada, incapacitated and motionless, watched Hidari slowly approach, while the fight between Jura and Himawari continued elsewhere. Jura, with his overwhelming strength, delivered a powerful blow against Himawari, using the power of his Rinnegan to amplify the impact. Himawari screamed in pain as she tried to recover, but Jura demonstrated total control of the situation. He praised her regenerative ability, comparing them to a Jinchuriki's, but highlighted that they would not be enough to compensate for the constant drain her body was facing. Although Himawari healed her chakra was rapidly depleted. Beside Himawari, Kurama manifested, recognizing the gravity of the situation. The fox admitted that he underestimated Jura, and warned Himawari that even with all her potential, she could not overcome such a powerful opponent. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Kawaki and Delta advanced towards the battle. Delta questioning Kawaki about his strategy. Determined, Kawaki replied that he would do whatever it took, but did not reveal details. Boruto, however, surpassed Kawaki, running at high speed towards the battle between Jura and Himawari. Upon arriving, he distracted Jura and quickly grabbed Himawari, moving her away from the battlefield before she could be harmed. Back in the confrontation with Hidari, Sarada was in trouble, trapped by Hidari's wood-style ability, mobilized her on the ground. He expressed a morbid curiosity about Sarada, implying that he would discover more about himself by devouring. But before he could act, Sarada noticed a small toad in the distance. On the other side, Boruto, now carrying Himawari, confirmed Sarada's location thanks to the same toad. With the aid of the Flying Thunder God Jutsu, Boruto teleported directly beside Sarada. In a quick move, he used his sword to cut Hidari's wood, freeing Sarada. Hidari, passive, observed Boruto without showing emotion. Konohamaru and the Jonin were astonished by Boruto's sudden end. From afar, Jura analyzed the situation, intrigued by Boruto's audacity. Hidari, in turn, finally recognized Boruto as an Otsutsuki, pronouncing the name with calculated cold as the tension between the two sides grew further. The tension in the air was palpable as Boruto faced Hidari, holding Himawari firmly with his left arm, while his sword gleamed in his right. Little Himawari was unconscious, but her brother remained firm, determined to protect her. Sarada, fallen to the ground, called out to him with a trembling voice, while Sumire, also injured, watched the scene with a mixture of concern and help. Konohamaru was on the verge of despair, his fists clenched as he observed the expressionless Hidari, who seemed oblivious to the tension. Boruto, with a serious expression, ordered Konohamaru to take Himawari to a safe place. Before he could finish the sentence, Hidari advanced with a swift strike, which was immediately blocked by Boruto. With a precise movement, he conjured a wind-style jutsu, creating a powerful gust that forced Hidari. Taking advantage of the open, Hidari disappeared into a dimensional rift, escaping before Boruto could counterattack. From afar, Delta and Kawaki watched. They hovered in the air. Delta, with an arched eyebrow, asked Kawaki about presence. Kawaki, still analyzing the situation, commented on Boruto, suggesting that he might have used a space-time ninja to get there. Meanwhile, the village's sensory team reported that Boruto had reunited with Konohamaru, Sarada, Himawari, and Sumire. Kawaki, attentive, noticed a distant figure. Jura, motionless, as if waiting for the right moment to act. Back on the battlefield, Konohamaru questioned Boruto about his impulsive action, but Sarada interrupted, thanking Boruto for saving her. And Sumire, still visibly concerned, mentioned that Sarada was Hidari's true target. Boruto, serious, explained that Hidari possessed abilities similar to Kashin and asked the sensory team to monitor for any signs of claw. Konohamaru, frustrated, tried to understand the situation, but Boruto insisted that the focus should be surviving the image. Suddenly, one of the sensory team ninjas detected a claw mark. Boruto realized that a dimensional rift was beginning to open on the ground. From there, countless shadowy creatures emerged, resembling small-tailed beasts, advanced in swarm. Boruto instructed Sarada to keep the enemies at bay, while he eliminated as many as possible. Konohamaru, cautious, ordered Sumire to move to a safe location. With agile and precise movements, Boruto leaped across the battlefield, using acrobatics to cut the creatures in half. Sarada, in turn, demonstrated her skill by neutralizing an enemy that tried to attack her from behind. However, Hidari emerged again, bypassing Sarada's defense with his intangibility. Transforming his arm into wood, he tried to immobilize her. Boruto, aware of the danger, threw a shuriken to deflect the attack, and then hit Hidari in the back of the neck with a Rasengan. The villain, however, regenerated almost and reappeared behind Boruto and Sarada, conjuring new dimensional rift with the power of his Rinnegan. Sarada suggested that Boruto escape by air, but he refused. He needed to keep his feet on the ground to absorb the planet's shock, his newest Rasengan still in development. Agreeing to buy time, Sarada advanced to face. Hidari tried to attack again. Konohamaru intervened, using a fire-style to block the enemy. Angrily, he demanded that Boruto explain his priority, but Sarada quickly reminded everyone that the combat needed to end as soon as possible. Hidari emerged from another rift, grabbing Sarada with his wooden arm. However, she reacted quickly, using Chidori Nagashi to electrify the enemy and free herself. Taking advantage of the moment, Sarada delivered a taijutsu blow, throwing Hidari in Boruto's direction. Finally activated his enhanced Rasengan Uzuhiko. The attack created a small tornado, began to tear Hidari's body apart. Trying to escape one last, Hidari opened another rift. Kawaki appeared, using Boruto to pin him to the ground, destroy him with a devastating explosion. The dust settled. Boruto and the others noticed the presence of a small Rinnegan eye float observing. Boruto immediately questioned Kawaki about what it could be. Kashin Koji appeared, explaining that it was a Togedama, a kind of thorn soul used for surveillance. Confused, Kawaki grabbed Boruto by the collar, demanding answers about how he knew that. Boruto, irritated, warned him to let go, threatening to cut off his arm if necessary. Before the discussion could continue, an unexpected attack pierced Boruto's chest and he fell to the ground, spitting blood. Sarada and Sumire screamed in despair at seeing him gravely injured, while Konohamaru tried to understand what had happened. From afar, Jura, responsible for the attack, coldly commented on the possibility of having missed a vital point. Delta, still observing from above, was impressed by Jura's precision. On the battlefield, Boruto was motionless on the ground, with Sarada by his side trying to process the gravity of the situation. Sarada tries to remember Boruto's words about the spy and realizes she needs to retrieve it before it's too late. However, as she moves to pick up the eye, it's hit by another of Jura's attack, pierces her forearm. Konohamaru's cry of horror echoes as Sarada, while the Rinnegan, floating like a menacing presence, tries. Konohamaru, in a mixture of despair and determination, warns the others about the imminent danger. But it's too late. The eye flies quickly towards Jura, who holds it with a sarcastic smile. Boruto, you already know about the Togedama, don't you? It's even more dangerous than you imagine. Jura provokes. He watches the wounded young man on the ground. He reveals disdainfully that for the Otsutsuki, only Kawaki is necessary as a vessel, and that Boruto's death has already been decided. From afar, Jura observes Boruto fallen, blood staining the ground as Sumire desperately tries to tend. Jura bids farewell coldly, calling him an interesting young. At that moment, Mamushi appears, formed from Buggy's body. He informs Jura that Matsuri has confirmed the return of someone who may be collaborating. Jura suspects this person revealed information about the Togi boy. Mamushi analyzes the situation, questions whether the thorns Jura's hands belong to Ari, that Jura confirmed, admitting the impressive strength of the adversary. Deciding to retreat, he mentions that he can't allow Hidari's thorns. Still, he observes Boruto, realizing that even on the verge of death, the boy seems blessed by extraordinary luck, as if the heavens insist on live. Meanwhile, Boruto, about to lose consciousness, plunges into a flash, sees himself fleeing from a group of ninjas who relentlessly hunt. During the pursuit, Toad appears before him, warning him about the presence of at least 20 enemies around. Toad, introducing itself as an ally, instructs Boruto to place his hand on its back to escape. With no alternatives, Boruto trusts the Toad and follows its instructions. Suddenly, Boruto is teleported to a secret base located on the outskirts of the Land of Wind, in an old abandoned Orochimaru facility. There, he finds the person responsible for the summoning jutsu. The man, who keeps his identity hidden, explains that the Toad was, in fact, a scientific ninja tool, built to look like a real amphibian, but remotely controlled. Boruto, suspicious, demands to know who he is. The man lifts a partially broken mask, revealing his identity, Kashin Koji. The memory of the ninja who killed Ao and tried to take his and Konohamaru's lives is instant for Boruto. Kashin Koji, with a serious look, asks directly, "Are you truly Uzumaki Boruto?" Question leaves Boruto confused, but Koji insists on the need for an honest answer. Upon mentioning Omnipotence, Kashin Koji reveals his suspicion. Boruto is the Ishiki Otsutsuki vessel who escaped the Kara organization. He explains that both he and Amado collaborated in Boruto's escape. Confesses that, although he doesn't fully understand the power of Omnipotence, he recognizes its devastating effects on people's memory. According to Koji, the Leaf Village's memories of Boruto and Kawaki were altered, but he was prepared for this possibility from the start. Kashin Koji takes the opportunity to admit his mistake. He apologizes for fighting Boruto in the past, acknowledging that he was wrong. Boruto, understanding the weight of the circumstance, replies that he understands the frustration of not being able to clarify his true position, something he has been intensely living. Finally, Koji reveals more about his purpose. He was created by Amado with the objective of defeating Ishiki and preventing the Divine Tree plan, which threatened to destroy the planet. Even with all the difficulty, Koji states that there is still hope and that somehow Boruto may be the key to saving the world. Kashin Koji faced Boruto with a serious and sorrowful expression as he shared a disturbing truth. He revealed that there was a method to save Sasuke Uchiha, who had been transformed into a tree after recent event. However, before teaching this method, Koji insisted that Boruto needed to understand the worst possible. He described a terrible vision. The Ten Tails would break free from its control, evolving into a new form and creating humanoid divine with its own conscience. Among these entities, a group led by a figure named Jura would emerge, carrying the greatest destructive. But Koji revealed that in one of his visions of the future, Jura would kill Boruto. The weight of this revelation left the young Uzumaki speechless, his face marked by worry. Kashin Koji explained that although this future was not an absolute certainty, it was a recurring possibility in his vision. He emphasized that Kawaki's fate would be tragic. Devoured by the Ten Tails, the planet would end up destroyed by the Divine Tree. Koji reinforced that, regardless of the risks, it was essential to prevent this outcome. He highlighted that the future was not fixed and that Boruto's awareness could alter events. Inspired by Koji's words, Boruto firmly declared that he would never accept sacrificing Kawaki, even if it was to save the world. His goal was to bring Kawaki back, restore his family, protect everyone he loved. In a symbolic gesture, he picked up the rogue ninja headband that had belonged to Sasuke, reaffirming his commitment to face the Ten Tails and any other enemy. The narrative then shifted to the present, where Boruto was lying on the ground, gasping and suffering from intense pain. Sumire tried to help him, but the situation seemed critical. Konohamaru, in turn, supported Sarada, who was also wounded. Despite her own pain, Sarada was more concerned about Boruto. At that moment, Himawari began to awaken, and noticing Sarada's state, ran to help her. Surprisingly, with impressive healing ability, Himawari healed Sarada's arm in sec, leaving everyone around astonished. Sumire, impressed, asked Himawari to help Boruto. However, before she could act, Kawaki interrupted her, saying that there was something more urgent to be done. Konohamaru took the opportunity, following protocols, placed sealing handcuffs on Boruto, made by Amado. These handcuffs would prevent the young Uzumaki from using any jutsu. Sarada protested, but Konohamaru explained that it was a necessary measure to get answers and asked someone to contact the 8th Hokage. Meanwhile, Kawaki noticed something strange on Boruto's clothes. A small toad, clearly a spy linked to Kashin Koji. Without hesitation, Kawaki crushed the toad, making it disappear. When Konohamaru questioned the act, Kawaki responded evasively, leaving the matter open. In his hideout, Kashin Koji felt the destruction of the spy toad and, frustrated, murmured about the growing challenges of his mission. The scene then shifted drastically to an unknown dimension filled with strange trees and dominated by a colossal cube that served as a dimensional pest. From the cube, humanoid figures emerged, products of the Ten Tails evolution. Jura the leading figure, questioned Hidari about possible problems, but he seemed disoriented, still retaining fragments of his conscience. Matsuri, anxious, awaited what would come from the cube, while Jura ordered her to begin the harvest. Matsuri began to manipulate the wood of the dimension, preparing for some grain. Jura in turn casually mentioned the need to give a name to the new being that was about to emerge. The environment pulsed with an unsettling and foreshadowing the birth of a new threat that could change everyone's destiny. In a silent and oppressive interrogation, Boruto finally regains consciousness. He was handcuffed, and in front of him were Konohamaru and Biko. Konohamaru quickly hit the stone caused by Jura's attack has been treated. Boruto tries to free himself from the handcuffs, but Konohamaru explains that these are not ordinary handcuffs. They were made by Amado, a master of scientific ninja tools. He clarifies that regardless of the number of seals Boruto tries to perform, these handcuffs block any, including space-time. Still trying to process the situation, Boruto asks about the state of his friend, the whereabouts of the enemy. Konohamaru replies that the enemies have disappeared without a trace, and their chakra could not be detected. He also informs, with regret, several ninjas died but that the main targets, Sarada and Himawari, were safe, as was the Inoshikacho trio. Meanwhile, in a nearby medical room, Inojin was being treated by Sakura. He remained unconscious, but Sakura assured him that he would be fine. Despite this, Ino showed visible anxiety, worried about her son's condition. Inojin's friends were also present, relieved to know that his recovery was only a matter of time. Back in the interrogation, the Konoha elders, Shikamaru and Yam, observed every detail through a one-way mirror. Eida also watched from a distance, commenting that the interrogation had begun. Demon, as usual, made joke, provoking Kawaki by insinuating that Boruto could reveal the whole. He mocked Kawaki, reminding him that no one would believe the lie about Boruto having killed Naruto. Kawaki ignored the provocation. Focused, Kawaki finally comments that regardless of what Boruto says, he remains a threat. As a note, he believes that Boruto, sooner or later, will lose control and that his elimination will be inevitable. However, before that, Kawaki suggests that valuable information should be extracted to face the new ends. The interrogation continued. Mitsuki observed everything from a balcony with a distant and introspective look. Konohamaru, still shocked, listened attentively as Boruto revealed the truth about the humanoid divine. He explains that the chakra of the people devoured by the Ten-Tailed is reflected in these trees, giving rise to humanoid copies. Hidari, for example, was a copy of Sasuke, Matsuri of Moegi. The most disturbing, however, was that Matsuri had Boruto as her target. Amado, elsewhere in Konoha, clarified that the Ten-Tails seeks to devour Otsutsuki to transform into a divine tree capable of sucking all life from the planet and generating a chakra. He adds that, unlike before, these entities now possess intelligence and act strategically, seeking new knowledge and experience. Boruto reveals that behind all this is a central figure, Jura. Shikamaru, upon hearing this name, shows evident unease. Boruto explains that Jura is not just another copy created by the Ten-Tailed. He is in fact the very incarnation of the Ten-Tail's humanoid form. According to Boruto, defeating Jura would be the only way to save the planet. Konohamaru, skeptical, questioned how Boruto could be so sure. Boruto, without going into detail, states that his source of information is reliable, but that he cannot reveal who it is to protect that person. The answer only increases the tension. Konohamaru reacts agitated, accusing Boruto of inventing stories. One of the Konoha elders reinforces the distrust, stating that Boruto is a traitor and that, regardless of the threats, he should be eliminated. Boruto, sarcastic, returns the accusation, reminding them that the same applies to him, since they were only keeping him alive for information. Despite the accusations and hostility, Boruto remains firm, knowing that the fate of the ninja world may depend on what he does next. Shikamaru took a deep breath, the weight of the past few hours etched on his face. He apologized to the elders present, assuring them that the search for Boruto would begin immediately. The elder, in a severe tone, warned that the incident would have serious repercussions and that the feudal lord would certainly not be pleased. Meanwhile, Sarada and Sumire entered the room where Konohamaru was. Curious, they asked about the outcome of the interrogation. Shikamaru's answer caught them by surprise. Boruto had escaped. Sarada was confused, trying to understand how this was possible. Suddenly, a telepathic message reached Shikamaru from it. Was an urgent communication from Kankuro, directly from the hidden sun. Shikamaru requested that the connection be made immediate. When Kankuro's figure appeared, his demeanor reflected the gravity of the situation. Without mincing words, he reported that Gaara had been defeated, as had his adopted son, Shinju. Both were trapped in a peculiar state, transformed into, but it seemed they were still alive. Kuro asked the Leaf Village for help, aware that dealing with it alone cost. The narrative shifts to the Shinju base, where the group celebrated the fruits of the recent harvest. A new member, named Ryu, was introduced to the group by Jura. Days earlier, however, an intense battle had occurred in Sunagakure. Matsuri had found Boruto and Kashin Koji in Orochimaru's old hideout, but the situation became complicated when the Sand Village ninjas were involved. Gaara, gravely wounded, was determined to protect Shinki. Despite his debilitated condition, he used a powerful sand sphere to keep the young ones safe from the Shinki insisted on fighting alongside his adoptive father. Gaara ordered him. Matsuri, impatient with the Kazukage's sacrificing posture, tried to convince him to abandon the young, tend to his own injury. However, Gaara remained firm, willing to give his life to ensure their safety. The climax of the battle, Shinki, disobeying Gaara's orders, used his iron sand to free himself from the sand prison and activated the iron sand sealing palm jutsu, safely sealing Gaara before the Shinju could attack. This heroic act saved the Kazukage's life, but exposed Shinki to danger. He ended up being captured by one of the Tsumeyak, while Araya and Yodo tried unsuccessfully to rescue. Even transformed into a tree, Shinki kept his sealing jutsu active, which impressed Matsuri. Recognizing the boy's courage, she decided to use that sacrifice to strengthen the Shinju's objective. Kankuro, devastated when reporting the events to Shikamaru, knew the situation was critical. Shikamaru advised Kankuro to be cautious, warning that the tree condition was still being investigated and that any discovery would be shared. Kankuro thanked him and, in a moment of vulnerability, asked Shikamaru to keep it a secret, to worry. Throughout the conversation, Sarada and Sumire remained in the room, listening intently. Sarada questioned more monsters like the Shinju could appear, to which Shikamaru replied that he did not rule out that possibility. He asked the two that if they managed to contact Boruto, they should inform him more information about the Shinju. Was girls agreed and left the room, unaware that a Kashin Koji's toad was present, spying on everything. Meanwhile, at the Shinju base, Ryu was born, seeming fascinated by the identity Jura had granted. However, something caught his attention. Using a power that combined iron sand with claw, he captured Code, who was observing from a distance. Despite the capture, Jura intervened, asking Ryu to free Code and introducing him to the new member of the group. Tension increased. The pieces on the board moved, and the fate of several ninja villages hung by a thread. It said that in the heart of darkness, the debt between monsters and villains is sealed in acts of power and manipulation. Jura, with his imposing presence, faces Code, who questions him with coldness and sarcasm. Aren't you going to hunt the Otsutsuki and devour them, or do you prefer to remain in the shadow of the chaos you yourselves created? Jura, with the calm of one who knows the universe's secret, replies that he's in no hurry. For him, there are many doubts to clarify before proceeding. He mentions that Boruto, though unwelcome by some, is not a concern, as Kawaki is enough to fulfill their ambitious plan. Koji, irritated by Jura's supposed arrogance, retorts. He makes it clear that no one gives him orders. With eyes burning with fury, Koji demands that the Shinju quickly fulfill their role of preparing the chakra fruit, that legendary artifact of concentrated energy, a condensed form of collective human information. Understand. Jura, however, merely smiles enigmatically, unconcerned, as if he already knows the outcome of that story. His curiosity for the fruit's power seemed greater than any urge. When Code, in a fit of irritation and wounded pride, tries to attack Jura with his claw mark, the villain demonstrates the abyss of power between. Without moving a muscle, Jura fires a tailed beast bomb-based laser, cutting Code's arm with terrifying precision. The scream of pain echoes, but Jura, insensitively, ironically, thanks Code for the freedom and individuality he provided to the group. It was a cruel thank, showing that Jura saw all those figures as disposable in a larger. Code retreated, vowing revenge. Jura decides to provoke Koji further. He tasks him with eliminating Boruto and all his allies. In exchange, he offers the chakra fruit, but not without mocking his obsession with power. Koji accepts, but makes it clear that the fruit will be his, no one else. Jura, with an enigmatic smile, simply replies, "I look forward to seeing how far you." On the other hand, Ryu, newly introduced to the group, observes everything with disgust for Code. In a private conversation with Jura, he expresses his desire to eliminate Code at the next opportunity, which receives the leader's approval. However, Jura advises him to focus on his true purpose, listen to his inner self, find his target. Ryu, after a moment of reflection, glimpses the fifth Kazekage, Gaara, sealed in a jutsu that only Shinki can. But since Ryu is his clone, he also carries this ability, which gives him a strategic advantage. Meanwhile, in Konoha, Boruto sits on the Hokage monument, contemplating the horizon. His gaze is heavy, filled with memories and regret. Kawaki approaches, interrupting the moment of solitude. He wants answers. Why didn't Boruto reveal the truth to the village? Why carry this burden alone? Boruto calmly explains that he wants to avoid chaos. Revealing the truth would divide and he prefers to bear this pain in silence. Thanks to Sasuke's support, Boruto found the strength to move forward, even as a rogue. But Kawaki isn't satisfied. He presses Boruto about Momoshiki, stating that this issue needs to be resolved. The young Uzumaki, with a somber air, recalls the fight against Code 2 years ago, when he used karma for the first time since leaving Konoha. At that moment, he felt something terrible. The same sensation of impending death he experienced when Momoshiki took control. Since then, Boruto abandoned karma, vowing never to rely on that power. Now, with so many pieces in motion and so many threats on the horizon, the future of Konoha and its allies seems more uncertain than ever. Kawaki looked at Boruto confused. What do you mean by that? He asked, wanting to understand what was happening. Boruto, with a serious expression, began to explain. In recent years, Momoshiki had been completely silent, waiting for the right moment to take control of his body. Kawaki immediately realized the danger of the situation. The boy was literally deteriorating from within. The idea of Momoshiki slowly dominating Boruto's body deeply worried him. Boruto, however, changed the subject as if he wanted to get that burden off his mind from him. He knew that, alone, he wouldn't be able to deal with the Shinju, and he needed Kawaki's help. But Kawaki, still immersed in his own thought, was not willing to set the conversation about Momoshiki aside. We need to resolve this first, he insisted. Boruto then made a promise. As soon as the situation with the Shinju was resolved and he lost control, Kawaki could do whatever he wanted without hesitation. Boruto, with a sigh, looked at Kawaki and suggested he become stronger. The best way, he thought, would be to free Naruto and train him. But with time against them, that wasn't a viable option. Then, in a moment of revelation, Boruto dropped a bombshell. Amado was limiting his powers, his defensive and regenerative ability. Kawaki was shocked. He had never imagined something like this was happening. Boruto explained that Amado had done this to protect him, as he couldn't die yet. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Amado observed everything through Kawaki's eye. He realized that Boruto had much more information than he had imagined. Quickly deduced that the toad Kawaki had destroyed belonged to Kashin Koji. Even reluctantly, Amado wondered what Koji's true objective was, how he had obtained this information. The conversation returned to Kawaki's karma, something Amado needed for his own. To avoid any problems with Kawaki, he had decided to restrict his power, preparing him for Koji's attack, which occurred 3 years ago. Boruto, knowing he could no longer delay the situation, asked Kawaki to verify this with Amado, prepare for battle. Kawaki, finally agreeing to help, stated that this did not change his desire to destroy the Uzumaki and the Ten-Tail, the sources of all. He knew that everything that propagated should be eliminated, and that included even himself. With that, the Uzumaki boy and Kawaki formed an alliance pact, ready to face the Shinju together. The battle was about to begin. But first, Boruto relived a flashback with Kashin Koji. The ninja, with his attentive gaze, explained to the young Uzumaki about space-time ninjutsu, an ability that allowed moving the target from one place to another, something similar to what the Otsutsuki did with Eida. Koji warned Boruto that he had already manifested this ability a few times, but in an uncontrolled way, which made it unpredictable and dangerous. Kashin Koji revealed that after 6 years, the future Boruto had managed to control this using scientific ninja tools marked with his own chakra, which allowed the boy to teleport from one place to another intentionally. This technique is called Flying Thunder God Jutsu, Koji said, explaining that Minato had enhanced a technique from Tobirama, creating an extremely powerful variant. The future Boruto named his version of the technique the same way, but his is even more powerful. Boruto, pressured by the weight of this revelation, felt overwhelmed. Koji explained how the future boy had learned to use this technique with precision after many errors and attempts. He used metal objects such as swords, shurikens, kunai to teleport. The closer the object was to his field of vision, the more precise the movement would be. Boruto, with a thoughtful expression, questioned if it would be more difficult to teleport to more distant places. Koji, with a detailed example, explained that if Boruto had 2 shurikens far apart and added his chakra to them, he would have to choose which one to teleport to first. It was an ability that required extreme concentration. Boruto became thoughtful, knowing that this technique would require more time and practice. However, the future Boruto had found a way to teleport long distances precisely, using different metals in innovative ways. Koji finally warned that this technique, the Flying Thunder God, required a level of concentration that Boruto was not yet prepared to reach, but that with time and effort, he would be able to fully master. Now, with battle in sight and a powerful technique ahead, Boruto knew that the path he was forging would not be. After reflecting on everything that was happening, Boruto finally decided it was time to begin his training. He had many things ahead of him, and the urgency of his situation pushed him to act. During his training, an idea came to his mind. He wondered if it wouldn't be easier to simply tell everyone the future, guide them to follow the right path. However, Kashin Koji quickly reprimanded him. He explained that the more people knew about the future, the harder it would be to predict events. This would create unpredictable ramifications, making it even more difficult to read possible futures, rendering the prediction technique useless. Koji stated that no one should know about the futures. If they did, they could alter the course of things, causing events to take undesirable turns. The people who knew about the future, like himself, Boruto, and also Eida, who observed everything from afar through her Senrigan, should keep this knowledge in the shadows so that everything followed its natural course without interference. As Eida listened in silence, Sarada, who was also in the room, couldn't contain her concern. She wanted to know where Boruto was and was determined to find him. "Where is he? I need to find him," she said, her voice full of anxiety. Eida, with her usual calm, explained that Boruto had his reasons for distancing himself, that he didn't want to be found, and that he shouldn't share everything he knew. Otherwise, the damage would be irreparable. Sarada didn't understand Boruto's situation. She couldn't accept that he was carrying everything alone, and began to blame Konoha for the boy's situation. "They're trying to eliminate him," she said, her frustration evident. Once again, Sarada pressed Eida about where Boruto might be, but Sumire, who was present, intervened. She understood Boruto's decision to isolate himself and explained that the boy didn't want to be found on purpose, even with them by his side. Sumire emphasized that Boruto acted freely because they didn't know everything. Their lack of knowledge gave him the freedom to make his own decision without external pressure. Sarada was speechless. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, especially since, without their help, Boruto would have faced the Shinju alone, which would be crazy. Sumire, with a tone of understanding, said that perhaps it was precisely because they were there that Boruto got hurt. If he didn't need to protect everyone, perhaps he wouldn't have been grave. The statement left Sarada without a response. Sumire then asked Sarada if she had ever thought about how painful it for Boruto to carry all. She also added that she understood Sarada what she felt for the boy. So Sarada had run into Boruto without thinking of herself. Sumire then apologized, embarrassed, ran out of the room. Sarada, still confused and touched, called her representative. But before she could say more, Golta woke up and suddenly patted Sarada on the head, asking not to be called that. Then she withdrew, leaving Sarada even sadder and more thoughts. Later, Kamaru entered the room and requested Eida's presence. He wanted to talk to her about what was happening. Tension was palpable environment. Eida followed Shikamaru to the meeting. Meanwhile, tense conversation was taking place in the office of the feudal lord of the Land of Fire. He reprimanded Konoha's advisors for allowing Boruto to escape. Although the advisors apologized, the feudal lord showed no patience. He demanded that Boruto be captured and eliminated as quickly as possible. Otherwise, he would not hesitate to call for reinforcements to deal with the situation. The advisor firmly declared that the intention was to eliminate Boruto and that this time he would not fail. That question hung in the air. Who would these reinforcements be? Would they be old allies or enemies returning to the scene, ready to further intensify the conflict? Boruto's future seemed increasingly uncertain. Shikamaru, his mind in a whirlwind, approached Eida, but quickly made it clear, don't stare at me. Every time he tried to focus during his conversations with her, the way Eida looked at him made the gears in his mind turn slowly, hindering his concentration. He knew the reason behind it. Eida enjoyed provoking him on purpose. Trying to compose himself, Shikamaru asked what was happening in Sunagaku. Eida, with her usual calm, began to explain the situation. She said that Shinki had been captured and that a new Shinju had emerged, named Ryu. His target was Gaara, but luckily the Kazekage was protected, sealed for now. However, Ryu had the power to undo that seal and devour his target. This information worried Shikamaru, and he immediately thought of initiating a mission to protect his brother, but Eida interrupted, saying that the threat was already a thing of. She apologized, as although she knew many things, couldn't personally hear the Shinju's conversation. This visibly irritated Shik, but before he could comment, Eida feared that one of the Shinju might stop listening to their conversation, changing the subject. Eida observed that Shikamaru had given up on eliminating Boruto and was using Mithri. Shikamaru, trying to feign ignorance, acted as if he didn't understand, but Eida didn't hesitate to confirm that she knew the situation. She assured him that she wouldn't tell anyone. She knew that if Shikamaru's position were compromised, he would also be it. Eida, even more cautious, reminded him that Kawaki had agreed to help Boruto with the monsters temporarily. Asked Shikamaru not to fear. Don't get in their way or you might hinder them, warned. Shikamaru, aware that Boruto had someone behind all this, asked if Kashin Koji was the collaborator. The instant he asked the question, one of Koji's toads appeared, confirming it was him. Koji explained that he would only reveal the essentials to avoid future complications, asked to send Konohamaru, Sarada, and Mitsunagakure, where they would receive help from two local. Kamaru, suspicious, warned that Ryu and Matsuri might appear. Koji already expected. Before saying goodbye, Koji gave one last instruction. Shikamaru should keep Himawari in Konoha as she was now Jura's target. If she left the village, she would be eliminated. If Jura appeared in Konoha, they should treat him as an ordinary person without trying to interfere, because if they did, everyone would be eliminated. If you bump into him, flee immediately. If he decides to attack, the chance of victory is 1 in a million. Koji concluded, thanking Shikamaru for following his heart, freeing Boruto. Keep going, following your own path. These words, however, frustrated Shikamaru, although he couldn't ignore the importance of the mission. Meanwhile, Sumire, still downcast by the words she had said to Sarada, was reflecting on her action. She felt a weight in her heart for having exposed her feelings so abruptly. On the mission, Konohamaru, Sarada, and Mitsuki were sent to Sunagakure. Koji requests Sarada, with her Asakura-style headband, thoughtful, still marked by the argument with Sumire. Konohamaru reprimanded her, asking her to focus on the mission and not become the target of allies' jokes. Soon, Yodo and Araya appeared, confirming that the mission was underway. However, Konohamaru and Mitsuki were skeptical about the origin of the information the Hokage had provided. Yodo, noticing the change in Sarada's energy, tried to talk to her. Did you change your style because of someone, or perhaps because of some man? She asked, making Sarada uncomfortable. Before she could answer, the enemies began to reveal themselves. Ryu and Matsuri, who were observing a seemingly dead Koji's toad so as not to be located. Konohamaru tensed, aware that the two knew the toad was a crucial clue to finding Boruto. Meanwhile, Sarada was still absorbed in thoughts about what Sumire had told her about Boruto. She knew he had his own reasons for not sharing everything. Now she understood a little more about his loneliness and the reasons behind his act. Sarada also reflected on her own, because without thinking of Sumire, she had run into Boruto's arm. Mitsuki, noticing Sarada's detachment, observed in silence, doing nothing about it. Ryu and Matsuri, still observing the toad, used their sensory power to track the object's origin. Matsuri, focused, soon discovered that it was Boruto who left the toad in that location. The pieces began to come together, and everyone's fate seemed about to take a decisive turn. Ryu was still confused, trying to understand how Matsuri knew about the tree, considering there were none in the desert. Shinju in turn calmly replied, explaining that trees were everywhere, even deep underground, that her sensing was extremely detailed. Matsuri added that she would follow the trails left by the two young Boruto and his ally, using the voices of the tree. The two watched from afar, with Yodo taking note of every caution. Konohamaru, attentive, quickly realized that with Matsuri's sensory power, it would only be a matter of time until they were detected. He knew that his mission was aligned with the information he had received, that the enemies clearly after Boruto, and the tension increased. He decided to act yet. Meanwhile, Sarada seemed lost in her own thought. Konoha, her distraction, she replied yes, that she needed to focus. Yodo, curious, questioned Konoha about. He wanted to know if defeating Ryu, obtaining the thorn, would allow them to return Shinki. Konohamaru confirmed that, based on the information he had, this was possible. The idea of being able to save Shinki gave Yodo a new motivation, but Araya, worried, warned her not to make any mistake. Yodo, determined, replied that she would do whatever it took to save Shinki without hesitation, even if it was considered crazy. The exchange of words between the two continued until Konohamaru, noticing the growing tension, intervened, asking them to stop. Yodo apologized, saying she wouldn't let her emotions interfere with the mission. Sarada observed everything, attentive to every detail. Before acting, Konohamaru reinforced the importance of everyone being on the same page regarding the mission. Mitsuki, still with reservation, questioned if it would really be possible, but Konohamaru encouraged them, stating that they had come this far and could not retreat. He then began the mission, drawing the attention of the two Shinju. When Ryu and Matsuri saw the ninjas, Ryu warned Matsuri, who froze upon recognizing Konohamaru. She knew him well, as she was a Shinju clone of Moegi and had feelings for him. Konohamaru, acting naturally, introduced himself and explained that they were there to follow the traces of Boruto, Konoha's traitor. He then asked about the two. Ryu, in turn, believed their identities were safe, since the ninjas didn't know who they were. However, when Matsuri became visibly embarrassed and unsure what to say, Ryu took the lead, starting to plan. He didn't know, but Matsuri was completely enchanted by Konohamaru. This made her hesitate. Meanwhile, Konohamaru reflected on what Shikamaru, the 8th Hokage, had told him. He recalled the Konoha leader's words, who not only asked to defeat the Shinji, but also to retrieve the Thorn Soul, a substance that appeared after their defeat. Konohamaru remembered Hidari and how he was defeated, which brought up the issue of the Thorn Soul. Shikamaru explained that for Shin, Kimoy, and other prisoners to return to normal, it was necessary to retrieve these souls and reinsert them into their body. Otherwise, the prisoners would continue to be revived repeatedly. That's when Konohamaru realized that Hidari might have already been revived. He was still skeptical about the information, but Shikamaru assured him it was crucial. Konohamaru, still with doubt, questioned how Shikamaru obtained this information. The Hokage, with his characteristic cunning, replied that the origin of the information was confidential and that he decided what to reveal. Even with this mystery, Konohamaru accepted the mission, knowing he had no other option. It was then that Kashin Koji's toad appeared on Shikamaru's shoulder, bringing more information. The Hokage reinforced that the Shinju were powerful creatures with great combat ability and that they were after several targets including Sarada, Konohamaru, Naruto, Boruto, Eida, among others. Shikamaru warned them that although these monsters were not essentially evil, they were like hatchlings acting according to their instinct. Their purity made them a threat. This made them even more dangerous. Now, with a clear objective, Konohamaru and his allies prepared to face the Shin, tried to save Konoha's future. Konohamaru was perplexed. He couldn't understand how Shikamaru, in his experience, suggested he make friends with the monsters instead of eliminating them. To him, they were just creatures to be exterminated, but Shikamaru surprised the Konoha ninja by stating that he should tame them because despite being dangerous, they were innocent hatchlings. The strategy involved gaining their trust, only to, at the opportune moment, betray them, stabbing them in the back. The weight of the mission began to fall on Konohamaru. Shikamaru then made a statement that shook him even more. Naruto wouldn't make that decision, but you're not Naruto. You're a different ninja, and that's why this strategy is necessary for humanity's survival. The coldness Shikamaru suggested was undoubtedly a reflection of his pragmatic vision. He had become a true Hokage, willing to do what was necessary, even if it was unbearable. Back in the present, Konohamaru introduced himself to the pair of Shin, asked about their identity. Ryu, still worried about Matsuri's strangeness, hesitated. He was suspicious, but Matsuri, with visible shyness, accepted the cooperation proposed. Konohamaru then sprang into action, observing the toad that Boruto and his ally was a clue. He knew he needed to find out more about it. Meanwhile, Mitsuki found a piece of metal on the ground and, with his deductive ability, concluded that it could be something related to Boruto's use of space-time. Konohamaru then suggested that the team split up to search the area. Sarada and Mitsuki went one way, while Konohamaru and Matsuri investigated the other. Konohamaru, observing Matsuri, realized that she wasn't well. She seemed to have difficulty breathing and was clearly confused about what was happening to her. Sarada, with her perceptiveness, realized that they might be close to Boruto's trace, pointed in the correct direction. Ryu, with a worried look, was suspicious, but Konohamaru tried to reassure him, suggesting that he and Matsuri take another path. Ryu, impressed by their confidence, revealed that he greatly respected the Leaf Ninjas, especially their leader, Jura. This respect caused some concern in Sarada and Mitsuki, who weren't sure if they could trust them. Ryu then revealed that, upon seeing Konohamaru and his team, he was ready to eliminate them, but decided to talk a bit, acknowledging that the interaction was worthwhile. Meanwhile, Yoda was completely focused, determined to rescue Shinki, and asked him to wait, promising they would bring him. In the midst of this, Shikamaru reflected on his choice, selecting Konohamaru for this. He knew that Matsuri was in love with, which could be an advantage, as she still didn't fully understand her. This could be something that would work in his favor. Shikamaru, always cold and calculated, warned Konohamaru not to get emotionally involved. He would need to be ruthless, separate the enemies, and take control of the situation. In the present, Konohamaru, worried about Mats, approached her and asked if he was feeling better. She, disconcerted, tried to deny that anything was wrong, but Konohamaru, without hesitation, began to talk about trying to understand what was really happening. Meanwhile, Koji asked Eida to watch what was happening in Sunagakura. She hesitated, still afraid of Mamushi, asked if he was nearby. Koji, always calm, assured her that Mamushi was safely in the hideout and that Eida didn't worry. Beside Koji, Boruto observed the mission attentively. He knew that everything was unfolding, but there was still much. Koji, who was leading the mission, explained that the first step would be to defeat Ryu and then join Konohamaru to eliminate Matsuri. Boruto, anxious, asked what the chances of failure were. Koji replied evasively, trying to reassure him, but Boruto insisted, and the old man confirmed that the chances were not high. However, he warned Boruto and Himawari not to act rash, making it clear that the mission required patience and caution. The game was underway, and everyone knew that the future of Sunagakure and those involved in the success. The mission was not successful. Jura would take drastic measures. He would not hesitate to act to eliminate any threat. He didn't want to lose anyone. Meanwhile, Konoha, Jura was calmly in a bookstore, buying some books to pass the time. The old store owner, seeing him, was visibly startled, but tried to remain calm, acting naturally so as not to attract more attention. Konoha's sensory team soon detected Jura's presence and, realizing the situation, decided to act. However, Shikamaru intervened, asking them not to take any rash act. He ordered civilians to withdraw, and no one to confront the intruder. Shikamaru's calm was evident, as he knew that any false move could end in disaster. Jura, for his part, completed his purchase without haste, paying for the books with change up front for future acquisition. The old man, still tense, accepted the payment and awaited the mysterious man's return, not daring to question his presence or intention. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Amado was engrossed in his research, calmly smoking a cigarette. Suddenly, the calm was broken when someone snatched the cigarette from his mouth. It was Kawaki, who with a swift movement pinned him against the wall. Determined, Kawaki demanded that Amado remove his limit. He knew that Boruto had warned him about the situation, that Amado was completely limited, without the ability to use his full power. Amado, in turn, seemed to have been waiting for this, already foreseeing that Kawaki would come to him seeking, and Araya saves Sarada and Yodo from a fatal death using his particle-sealing sword to nullify the paralyzing effect of Ryu's magnetic sand. However, the presence of a Sunagakure ninja with such a specific ability to contain the iron sands does not guarantee victory for them. Yodo, emotionally distraught at seeing the personification of Shinju, her former teammate, loses control. Even with Araya trying to help her stay calm, her rage explodes, leading her to act impulsively. This moment of loss of control causes a rupture in the already fragile attempt at alliance with the humanoid Shinju. Yodo's loss of control is triggered by witnessing the Thorn Soul Fruit for the first time, a vision that brings dark memories. Sarada, who had already faced something similar when seeing the power of Hidari and Jura during the Konoha invasion, tries to understand what is happening. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Amado acts with precision to contain Kawaki, who becomes increasingly aggressive. With a precise command, Amado deactivates Kawaki, saying, "Save your grumbling for when you're asleep." This mechanism, a result of the advanced technology implanted in Kawaki, proves indispensable, especially considering the unstable behavior he has demonstrated. Sumire, witnessing the event, becomes suspicious. The idea that someone can manipulate Kawaki's component raises concern. If Sumire or another person learns to tamper with these mechanisms, they could deactivate Kawaki's security protocol, making him even more powerful, potentially. The protection measures created by Amado prove effective, but also carry the risk of falling into the wrong hand. As Kawaki balances his strength between defensive and offensive mode, a new vulnerability emerges. In defensive mode, he becomes practically invulnerable, but when adopting an offensive state, parts of his body can be compromised, especially when facing enemies as powerful as Jura. This duality between defense and attack reveals the price of his strength. Furthermore, Amado's plans with Karma take a new direction. He intends to transfer Karma to a Delta clone, using the consciousness of his deceased daughter, Akebi. This experiment could lead to the emergence of a new Otsutsuki, something not seen since Kaguya. The possibility of Akebi resurfacing as such a powerful entity promises to further disrupt the balance between Amado and Kawaki. Tension grows, fueling uncertainties about the future and the developments this new creation may bring to the ninja world. The plot progresses with the characters facing challenges that test not only their abilities but also their alliances and emotions. The path unfolding is full of dangers, conflicts, and revelations that promise to change everything. It's hard to say if Amado's plan to revive his daughter Akibi is genuine or merely a facade for something larger. Recent shinobi history presents unsettling parallels, such as Black Zetsu's manipulation of the Uchiha Stone Tab, which distorted Hagoromo's legacy to achieve Kaguya's return, the infinite Tsukuyomi. Amado's intention remains shrouded in mystery, but his actions certainly have the potential to change the course of events. Kawaki's transformation into a living weapon through scientific ninja tools is a controversial. Unlike the traditional effort to gain power, which often comes with emotional growth and maturity, Kawaki's reliance on technology distances him from this natural process. His ninja journey, begun under Naruto's guidance, seemed to have awakened something more human, but now the pursuit of immediate power threatens to nullify that progress. After all, power gained without effort can be lost just as easily. Kawaki risks paying a high price for it. Meanwhile, in another part of the conflict, Konohamaru faces a complicated dilemma. His hesitation in handling the situation reveals a lack of the necessary ruthless critical mission. Matsuri, apparently trapped in an emotional illusion involving Konohamaru, could become an unexpected obstacle. The unfolding of this relationship could culminate in a direct confrontation. Konohamaru will have to make a difficult decision, either by defeating Matsuri with a calculated attack or by manipulating the situation to achieve the ultimate goal of extracting the Togidama, the Thorn Soul Shikamaru considers crucial. Near the Ryushinju, Yodo and Araya play out a tense. Despite Yodo's attempt to maintain Ninja's composure, the situation pushes her to her limit. Sarada and Mitsuki work hard to set a trap using the Thorn Soul as bait, but the plan is threatened by the unpredictability of events. Ryu, using his enhanced sensory ability through the iron sand, quickly perceives Yodo's hostile intention. His ability to track energy and detect threats is impressive, but it also exposes a vulnerability. Yodo's bloodlust attracts his attention, putting the entire group at risk. The interaction with the humanoid Shinju also follows an unexpected path. Boruto's attempt to infiltrate the group, carrying the weight of being treated as a criminal by everyone, doesn't last long before collapsing. The Shinju, guided by self-preservation instincts and the influence of the Thorn Soul within it, reveals that its loyalty is limited. There's a belief that, should the Thorn Soul be removed from its body, it would enter an inactive or even near-death state, making it a key piece in the balance between the sides of the conflict. The scenario is complex and full of unpredictable variables. Emotional ties, power plays, and the pursuit of strength continue to intertwine, building a plot where every decision can be the catalyst for devastating. The events surrounding the humanoid Shinju and their complex powers continue to unfold in an intrigue. The case of Hidari, who sacrificed his life to activate an ability, raises questions about the true extent of these powers. The possibility that the Ryu Shinju is manipulating the situation, using tricks like a fake Togidama created with iron sand to deceive the ninja, makes the fight even more unpredictable. Mitsuki, upon realizing that the Togidama was fake, demonstrates that the humanoid Shinju, far from being naive, possessed formidable strategic intelligence. This is evident in Ryu's behavior, who reacts with sarcasm when confronted, hinting that he's always one step ahead. Emotional manipulation and apparent betrayals are just part of their game, making him an even more dangerous opponent. Araya's sword, specifically designed to deal with the iron sand particles, proved to be a vital resource. This weapon, used to save Yodo from the particle control, is a clear counterpoint to Ryu Shinju's power. However, it remains to be seen if this weapon will be enough to fully. The fact that the sword was created to be used in conjunction with Shin, Master of Iron, suggests that Ryu may have difficulties facing the sand. Even so, there is constant uncertainty about Matsuri's next and the true nature of her role. We see a flashback where Shinki says he has imbued his chakra into Araya's sword, which would allow him to control the iron sand, even if in a limited way. Shinki says he does this to increase their power, even if only a little, in order to protect his father. Ryu unleashes a dense rain of iron sand to surround and pressure the ninja present, including Sarada, Mitsuki, Yodo, and Araya. The initial situation is extremely unfavorable for the group, as Ryu's sand is dense, razor-sharp, and can be freely manipulated, creating a constant offensive and defensive threat. The fight begins strategically. Araya, wielding a special sword made with Shinki's iron sand, is the only one capable of directly cutting through Ryu's manipulations. With precision, he frees Mitsuki, striking against the waves of sand to carve a path. This moment marks the beginning of a coordinated offensive. Sarada then launches her attack with a fire-style jutsu, firing a blast of flames toward the enemy, but Ryu quickly responds by creating a protective shield with his sand, completely blocking the attack. As the battle intensifies, Mitsuki enters the fight in his Sage mode. He summons snakes that extend across the battlefield and temporarily capture Ryu, restricting his movements and creating an opening. However, demonstrating absolute mastery over his technique, Ryu dissolves his physical form and transforms entirely into iron sand, escaping the snake prison with ease. This ability makes the enemy extremely difficult to hit with direct attacks. Transformed into particles, Ryu attempts to strike, but is stopped by Araya, who uses the sword to bring Ryu back together. Taking advantage of the moment Ryu returns to physical form, Mitsuki advances while Sarada activates her Sharingan and charges forward with a Chidori, landing a precise strike to the enemy's torso. The technique lands squarely, but Ryu once again dissolves his body into sand, reducing the impact and preventing further damage. Shortly after, he shifts strategy and summons a swarm of creatures, claw marks, that emerge from within his clothing and rapidly spread across the battlefield. The creatures are numerous and attack simultaneously, forcing the ninja onto the defensive. Sarada and Mitsuki attempt to hold off the claw marks' attacks, but the growing number of creatures begins to overwhelm them both. Meanwhile, Yodo is caught off guard and bitten by one of the creatures, making it clear they are not mere decoys, but lethal threats. Araya, trying to regain control of the situation, charges forward with his sword, cutting down the monsters closing in. However, when he attempts to strike Ryu again, his blade is seized and, in a swift motion, Ryu uses his abilities to teleport the sword away, along with the claw marks, stripping Araya of the only weapon capable of neutralizing his iron sand. With the sealing sword out of play, the group finds itself at a severe disadvantage, with no means to cut or contain the enemy's iron sand manipulation. The situation becomes critical. Elsewhere, Konohamaru speaks with Matsuri. During the conversation, Matsuri calls Konohamaru Konohamaru-chan, a form of address that only Moegi used to use. This raises suspicion and distrust. The tension builds when Eida observes the scene from afar and comments that Konohamaru is about to be devoured. Boruto, also aware of the situation, shows concern for his friend and wants to intervene. However, Kashin Koji stops him, arguing that he must stay focused on the main objective. Boruto's dilemma becomes clear. He is torn between saving his allies and pushing forward with his mission. Meanwhile, in the dimension of the divine trees, Jura and the others discuss the meaning of love and the reasons that drive them, hinting that there is a deeper ideology behind the actions of these new enemies. Konohamaru stands face to face with Matsuri, who reveals herself as an imminent threat by saying it is time to become one with him, suggesting she intends to devour or absorb him as they have done with other victims. The situation is critical. Mitsuki and Araya are imprisoned by Ryu's iron sand, completely immobilized, while Sarada and Yodo try to find a way to turn things around. The pressure is intense and relentless as Ryu freely controls a massive amount of iron sand, threatening to crush his opponents at any moment. Yodo decides to act and attempts to negotiate with Ryu. She offers herself in exchange for her companion's freedom, stating that her sensory abilities could be useful to him. However, Ryu coldly rejects the offer. Without any hesitation, he violently attacks Yodo, piercing her body with a lance made of iron sand. The attack is direct, brutal, and leaves Yodo gravely wounded. Even as she bleeds and falls, she locks eyes with Sarada with a firm gaze, conveying, even in silence, a clear message that Sarada needs to unleash her full power to protect the others, even if it means hurting herself emotionally or crossing her own limits to protect just one person. Faced with the scene, Sarada goes into shock. The pressure, the despair, and the pain build up inside her until finally she awakens the Mangekyo Sharingan. It is an intense and transformative moment. Her eyes take on a new, blazing, and powerful form. Immediately after the awakening, Sarada activates an entirely new technique. A vortex appears before her, a kind of energy whirlpool that begins to suck in all the iron sand around her. The technique completely dismantles Ryu's manipulation, freeing Mitsuki and Araya, and nullifying the enemy's advantage on the battlefield. The vortex is so powerful that it drastically alters the surrounding landscape. Ryu, caught off guard, is forced to retreat in the face of the new technique's power. Mitsuki watches everything in astonishment, realizing that Sarada has surpassed a new limit. The technique appears to have dimensional or gravitational properties, similar to abilities seen in other dojutsu users such as Kamui. However, its exact mechanics are not yet explained. What is clear is that Sarada now poses a real threat to the divine trees. Meanwhile, Konohamaru faces Matsuri. Shikamaru had given him instructions to get close to the enemy by pretending emotional ties in order to distract her and open a window for a surprise attack. Konohamaru follows the plan and manages to deceive Matsuri long enough. In a precise movement, he channels chakra and creates two giant Rasengans, which he launches against her in succession. The attacks destroy both of the opponent's arms before she has time to react. Victory seems imminent. However, when Matsuri, still conscious, calls him by the affectionate nickname Konohamaru-chan, the Jonin hesitates. The memory of Moegi, who used to call him the same way, paralyzes him for a brief instant. This hesitation, however brief, is enough to compromise everything. Konohamaru, overcome by emotion, is unable to land the finishing blow. Matsuri takes advantage of the opening and begins her recovery, once again becoming a direct threat. Sarada is lost in thought, reflecting on her desire to become Hokage and the promise she carries to protect the people who matter most to her. In particular, she recalls her feelings for Boruto and how that motivates her to keep fighting, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. With a coordinated sequence of multiple vortexes, Sarada dismantles the iron sand field and, at the peak of her technique, she focuses a single black hole and expands it destructively. The gravitational force of the technique is so intense that it compresses Ryu's body, even in his semi-dispersed form, causing severe damage and forcing him to retreat. Using this power, Sarada is able to control gravity and choose where she wants that gravity to be exerted. Ryu attempts to attack her, but every attempt is futile. Even his attempt to retreat back to the Divine Tree's lair is thwarted. Sarada's power is so overwhelming that Ryu cannot move so much as a single finger. With that, Ryu is completely destroyed, transforming into the spiked soul. The technique is powerful, but it comes at a cost. Shortly after its activation, Sarada collapses to the ground, exhausted and with her eyes bleeding due to the extreme use of the Mangekyo Sharingan. Mitsuki catches her before she falls completely, visibly worried about her condition. Ada informs Kashin Koji about the situation, and Koji feels relieved as one of the objectives has been achieved. Boruto questions him about whether Yodo dying was necessary, and that Koji had withheld information. Koji says that the outcome of Sarada awakening this power only happened because of the situation. Had Boruto intervened, it never would have occurred. Boruto asks about Konohamaru, whether he would survive. Koji states only one thing, that if Boruto appears on the battlefield, the situation will become more complicated, since the Divine Trees share information among themselves. Meanwhile, the confrontation between Konohamaru and Matsuri reaches a breaking point. Konohamaru, who had already suffered severe damage to his shoulder, is on the verge of being mortally wounded, when in an instant, Boruto appears. With fast and precise movement, using both his teleportation abilities and kunai, he places himself between the two and delivers swift strikes against Matsuri, incapacitating her in a matter of seconds and destroying her with a decisive blow. Boruto's action is surgical, revealing his growth and mastery of the techniques that now distinguish him as a true Otsutsuki warrior. Following Matsuri's defeat, an ominous presence makes itself known. Jura observes the scene and identifies Boruto as the true target, referring to him as Otsutsuki Boruto. It becomes clear that with his presence now revealed, Boruto will face serious consequences. While Araya manages to recover Ryu's spiked soul, the situation shifts completely with the arrival of Jura, who manifests from a claw mark. His presence brings a new level of threat to the battlefield, and his immediate focus turns to Boruto, who had just saved Konohamaru from the previous danger. Jura opens his attack with a concentrated energy blast, similar to a miniature tailed beast ball, fired with lethal precision from long range, though it misses. Part of the attack goes flying toward them, and he fires another mini-tailed beast ball. Boruto notices the attack and is able to act quickly. He leaps into action and saves Konohamaru, with both managing to dodge in time, narrowly avoiding death. The blast grazes them and causes damage, but it is not lethal. The gravity of the situation becomes even clearer when Boruto begins positioning kunai marked with his special seal across the field, anticipating a high-speed, high-strategy battle. Using the Flying Raijin Jutsu, Boruto teleports behind Jura in an instant and executes his Rasengan. The attack lands squarely on Jura, but the damage is not satisfactory. Boruto understands that the only way to effectively damage Jura is with the Uzuhiko Rasengan, but to do so he needs to have his feet on the ground. Jura attacks, Boruto loses his sword, and then Jura immobilizes Boruto using wood style. Jura asks Boruto what love is. From his perspective, love is a flaw of human beings. Boruto seizes the moment and absorbs rotational energy through his feet, teleports behind Jura, and lands the Uzuhiko Rasengan. For a brief moment, Boruto believes he has managed to cause significant damage. However, Jura stands back up shortly after, completely calm, with very little damage. Even while staggering, Jura quickly demonstrates that he has perfectly understood the nature of the Uzuhiko Rasengan and reveals that, by grasping the rotational energy principles behind the technique, he was able to nullify it completely. The attack, which should have been devastating, is neutralized without leaving any lasting effects. Eida wonders whether Boruto will survive. Kashin Koji explains that escaping is extremely complicated for him, as a long-distance teleportation requires intense concentration, something Jura would never allow. Another factor is that Boruto needs to buy time for his friends to escape, and that calculation is running through his mind. On top of that, there is not even a 1 in a million chance of Boruto winning. Mitsuki demonstrates his skill by facing off against several claw marks, using his Sage mode to destroy the creatures with precision and efficiency. He reunites with Konohamaru, who has just escaped the confrontation with Matsuri, and together they discuss their next steps. Araya heads toward the Sand Village to deliver the spiked soul. taking with him the gravely injured Yodo, underscoring the urgency of the situation. Despite everything, Boruto does not retreat, even gravely wounded, with his body still affected by Jura's wood-style techniques and Sasuke's sword already lost. He stays focused. Jura intensifies his attacks with tailed beast balls in different forms, using firearm analogies to name his shots, something that stands out as a curious way to categorize his offensives. One of the tailed beast balls is fired like a short-range shotgun, and another like a precision rifle, a direct reference to Jura's impersonal and methodical fighting style. Boruto shows remarkable ability in evading the assaults. With precise movements, he uses the flying Raijin jutsu to teleport between the kunai he previously scattered, creating opportunities for counterattacks and keeping Jura in a constant state of alertness. In a surprising moment, Boruto appears behind the enemy and uses his purple lightning, a fast and dense electrical technique which lands squarely on Jura's left foot, severing it. The scene shocks even the antagonist himself, who is forced to pull back and recompose himself. Even so, despite the loss of the limb, Jura shows no despair. His behavior remains calm and analytical, raising questions about whether he is truly using his full power. The difference in strength between the two does not seem as brutal as Kashin Koji had previously reported, suggesting that Jura may be holding back part of his strength, perhaps to study Boruto, or to fully understand the Uzuhiko Rasengan. During the confrontation, Boruto also makes use of classic ninjutsu tactics. In a sequence reminiscent of the iconic battle between Naruto and Zabuza, he substitutes a kunai for himself using a substitution jutsu, deceiving Jura and creating space for a counterattack. This intelligent use of classic strategies reinforces Boruto's growth as a ninja, making it evident that he does not rely solely on raw power or his Otsutsuki abilities. At the moment when Jura prepares a final tailed beast ball to finish off Boruto, the chapter's turning point arrives. Kawaki suddenly appears on the battlefield. With a swift and silent lunge, he pierces through Jura's skull and eye from behind in a lethal and unexpected attack. The scene is visually striking, with Jura's body being run through abruptly, almost grotesquely. The arrival of Kawaki, now in his complete form and freed of restrictions, is the true climax. He reveals that he had previously been limited by Amado, who had redirected all of his offensive parameters to defense, severely compromising his performance. After confronting the scientist and restoring his original power, Kawaki returns to the battlefield ready to fight with everything he has. Jura, even wounded, immediately recognizes the shift, acknowledging the substantial increase in power. As Kawaki activates his karma and faces Jura, Kashin Koji watches from a distance, reflecting on the consequences of this new battle configuration. Koji comments that Kawaki's entry has completely altered the 10 directions, his Shinjutsu of foresight. Until then, 90% of possible futures showed Boruto dying. But now, with Kawaki by his side, the balance has shifted. Koji also reveals that for 6 days he has received no new updates from the jutsu, indicating that hidden variables are interfering with his visions of the future. From this point on, both Boruto and Koji are forced to reassess their plans in the face of the uncertain scenario taking shape. Additionally, Delta arrives at the designated location, meeting up with Mitsuki and Konohamaru. And that was the full summary of Boruto Two Blue Vortex, from the first chapter all the way to chapter 23. This is the biggest and most complete summary you will find on this incredible series. Personally, I'm really enjoying it, and as soon as possible, I'll bring new updates. If you enjoyed it, leave a like on the video. These summaries take a lot of work, but the result is absolutely worth it. Subscribe to this channel, 100% focused on summaries. And check out the 2 videos appearing on screen, one summary of Naruto and another of Boruto, Naruto Next Generations. I'll see you there.